What if Order 66 caused Ahsoka to be sent back in time? Ahsoka stood on the bridge of the vendor, watching the stars burr past in hyperspace. It was quiet and calm, a nice feeling after the chaotic siege of Mandalore. However, her peace was broken through her connection to Anakin. She grabbed her head as his painting fusion poured through their bond and as what felt like a duel carried out. When she reached out to Anakin though, he wasn't there anymore. The bond was still there, but Anakin was no longer on the other side. Ahsoka started towards the command center, towards where Rex had gone just moments earlier, but shockwaves in the Force hit her as she felt hundreds of Jedi getting killed. She began to stumble as she felt their deaths. Each step she took, even more Jedi were dying. By the time she finally reached the command center, the doors automatically sliding open for her. She could barely walk. It felt like she was losing control of her own body and her mind was muddled and going foggy. Upon seeing Rex, she started telling him what she felt with Anakin, but the words died in her throat as he turned toward her. His movements were rigid and his eyes were dilated, and there was tears sliding down his cheeks. His hands were shaking as he dropped his helmet, like it was just an afterthought. She moved towards him, but he whipped out his pistols as if he was facing a dangerous enemy. She was vaguely aware of the two other troopers who were standing guard raising their blasters towards her, but Rex told them no, that he would do it. So it called his name, but it only came out as a barely audible whisper. He urged, no begged her, to find him, to find Fives. Ahsoka barely heard him though. It was like she was in a dream and was rapidly losing control of her senses, body, and ultimately her consciousness. She tried to respond to him, but before she could, Rex started firing. She was so disconnected from her body at this point that she couldn't react and didn't even feel the pain when Rex's shots hit her. She didn't feel anything besides the betrayal and fear. She felt her body fall, but that was the last sensation she knew before darkness encompassed her. In what felt like just a couple of heartbeats, she awoke with a jolt, panic and fear racing through her. She quickly reached out with the Force and repaired herself, but she didn't feel any threat or death. She didn't even feel the clones. She forced her racing heart and mind to calm and to take in her surroundings. Looking around, she realized that she was in a dorm room. Reaching out with the Force again, she felt Force sensitives all around her. She felt Plo Koon and, even though their connection appeared to be one-sided, Anakin. But his presence was a bit strange. Why was she here? What had just happened? She was sure that she felt the deaths of thousands of Jedi, including many she felt were alive right now. She was sure that Rex had killed her. She could feel her body start to shake as she brought her hands in front of her. It was that of a child's. Looking down her body, she realized that it was that of her younger self. Looking around the dorm room, she saw the familiar faces of her clanmates in Clawmouth's clan. Could it all have been a dream, or perhaps a Force vision? No, it couldn't have been. It was too vivid, too long, too painful. There was also that one-sided bond with Anakin, who she had not met till she was assigned as his Padawan. The only other option was that she had returned to the past. Her soul left her older body and went back to her younger one, back before everything had happened. A Jedi Master entering the room snapped her from her thoughts. He smiled at her, seeing as she was already awake, then went about waking the other younglings. It was funny. She didn't feel ready to join the Order lesson a day before, if you could even say it had been a new day. And now she was part of it again, and there was nothing she could do about it. She doubted they would let her leave with her still being a kid, and even if they did, she wasn't sure she could survive. She had barely survived before, and now no one on the outside knew who she was. However much she disliked it, she was a Jedi again. She would have to wait till she was older thinking about leaving, at least till she was old enough to take care of herself like last time. However, perhaps this was a chance to change everything. Looking at her fellow clanmates, she wondered what had happened to them, but as they started leaving the dorm room, she quickly put all those thoughts aside. There were still a few years before the war started, and even more before she was old enough to leave the Jedi Order, so there was plenty of time for her to think about everything later. For now, there was a day of class ahead of her, and she just hoped that she would be able to get through it, and be like her younger self enough not to attract attention. As she followed her clanmates, she was relieved that her mind and body were fully hers again, and functioning as they should, albeit younger and weaker. As the day passed painfully slow, Ahsoka should have realized from the beginning that she couldn't have succeeded in acting like her younger self. She had simply changed too much, been through too much. Thankfully though, no one said anything. They just cast glances at her, a mixture of worry, curiosity, and disdain. She was an outcast among her clanmates because she was not only gifted and energetic, but she openly expressed her emotions as well as her attachment to Plo Koon. They bullied her, but it was never too severe because of Plo Koon. They wanted to be on the good side of a member of the Jedi High Council and took advantage of the times he visited her. She was actually thankful that she hadn't seen him today, as he would immediately have known something was off, even though she still desperately wanted to confirm that he was alive and safe. Feeling his death through the Force had shook her, and she knew that she was going to have trouble sleeping because of it and all the other deaths. She just feared what he would say or do when he saw her. Ahsoka couldn't stop thinking about everything throughout the day either. It distracted and got her in trouble, though she was able to learn that it was years 3625 after the Treaty of Coruscant, or ATC, make her 8 years old right now. That night after the troubling day, as she lay in her bed, she let herself truly think about what had happened and what to do. She could just tell the High Council or Plo Koon about everything, but she didn't think that they would believe her or do anything. They were wary of prophecies, and what she said would likely sound like one, if they believed her at all, that is. Most of them wouldn't want to do anything. Instead, they warned her to make sure she wouldn't tell anyone or wouldn't act on it. Not only that, but they had grown more suspicious of Chancellor Palpatine as the war went on. She wasn't sure why, but she knew that if they acted at this time, they would just tell him, as she was sure that they currently completely trusted him. They might just tell him regardless of whether they acted or not. She didn't know if this mattered, but she wasn't exactly sure what had happened, or who was involved, and she just wanted to be safe. There was not much she could do by herself either, especially as a youngling. Even when she was a Padawan, she wasn't privy to a lot of information or had access to all the records. Not only that, but the clones weren't known to the galaxy yet. Though if she remembered correctly, the battle droids had already been showcased as the battle on Naboo had already happened. Since she couldn't do much because of her age and rank now, to pass the time, she would just train. Both in the Force and in lightsaber combat, but primarily lightsaber combat. This was more so because she needed something to focus on and distract herself until she was assigned to become Anakin's Padawan again. Otherwise, she feared that she would just go crazy repeating her life as youngling and make a critical mistake. That and doing lightsaber forms had helped clear her mind before, and she desperately wanted her thoughts to stop racing. Ahsoka would also try to get any information she could, whether by visiting the library or talking to other Jedi. While she was at it, she would also train and practice for some of the things that would come. To better prepare herself and her young body to handle the war easier, as well as look at tactics used in previous wars and what she remembered from her 3 years of war. If she could command better, then many lives would be spared and many more battles could be won, and quicker at that. Starting this, whenever she had free time around her usual classes, and the training centers were empty, she would go train with a training saber as well as exercise, toning her body and ingrained the movement of lightsaber forms into her body. She tried to avoid everyone when she did this, wanting to avoid the questions and curious glances, or worse, the disdain and bullying from other younglings. So when there were others, she instead went to the library and looked through as much information as she was allowed. One evening, at times she found the training center to always be empty. While she was rigorously training and was focusing on improving her Form 3, form that she had previously paid no special attention to as it didn't suit her, she was stalled out of her focus by clapping. Ahsoka whirled around to find Battlemaster Sindralik behind her, smiling kindly. He commented that he hadn't believed the reports that there was a youngling spending a lot of time in the training center, but here she was, and he was impressed with her dedication and determination. Ahsoka meekly thanked him, not wanting this to go anywhere, but Sindralik continued. He told her that he thought that she had immense potential and asked if she would like to receive training and guidance from him. Ahsoka almost immediately refused, but stopped herself, and forced herself to think for a moment. He was one of the best duelists in the Order. To be personally trained by him would be one of the best things that could happen, though there was a good chance it would draw people's attention. Still, she thought that the benefits outweighed the risk, so she hesitantly agreed. His smile broadened and he walked over and picked up a training saber from their place by the wall. Turning back to her, he asked if it was alright to start his lesson today. Ahsoka only nodded before it began. From that day forward, they met once a day, their meeting even excusing her from some of her tedious classes which she was relieved to be free from. He went through the 6 lightsaber forms with her, correcting her stance, giving her advice, as well as showing her exercises for her to do that would improve her stamina and strength. He went about showing her the moves of all lightsaber forms, wanting her to familiarize herself with them and be able to switch between them at a moment's notice. However, after a while, he told her there was only so much he could teach her with a training saber, so he requested that she participate in the next gathering ahead of her class. Ahsoka didn't believe that it would be granted, as one's clans should be tight-knit as a family. Her getting her lightsaber before them would only harm their camaraderie, so she didn't think much of it. However, she was surprised when Sindralik brought the approval along with the fact that she would be joining said clan of older children. She had mixed feelings about this. On one hand, though they bullied her, her clan was like her family, though she was still fine to get away from them. However, the new clan which she was joining would likely bully her too, if not worse. She would also stick out more, and she realized that the risk she had taken to train Sindralik was even greater than she thought. But there was nothing she could do, as it was already too late to back out, and word had already spread. In the end, she was fine with this. She had previously been the top of her clan, and had been held back because of them, so being able to receive more advanced training was exciting and new, and she felt relieved that she didn't have to continue to try acting like her younger self anymore. Ahsoka first met her new clanmates when she boarded the shuttle that would take them to Ilum. Besides the curiosity and perhaps one individual that looked at her with disdain, they mostly ignored her, and she didn't bother trying to introduce herself or talk to them. During their trip, she sat in silence by herself while the others excitedly conversed among themselves, occasionally casting glances her way, hinting that they might be talking about her. They soon landed on Ilum and met Grandmaster Yoda outside the temple along with another Jedi Ahsoka didn't recognize. As they guided them inside, Ahsoka grew curious about what had happened to Yoda before she was sent back. She hadn't felt his death, and she didn't know what had happened to the Jedi Temple, so perhaps he had still been alive. Had the Jedi Order survived, or was his and the rest of the Jedi's deaths just delayed? Could she really change the future for the better if she tried? She stopped her train of thought there as she realized she was staring at Grandmaster Yoda. She wouldn't let herself question every choice. Even if the Jedi Order survived, she had felt too many Jedi die. This conflicted her. She wanted to stop the deaths of all those Jedi, but she also wanted to leave the Jedi. It was too closely tied to the Republic and cemented in their ways. Then there, she resolved that she would do what she could to change the future before she left the Jedi Order. Forcing herself out of her thoughts, she noticed Grandmaster Yoda was now looking at her, his gaze a mix of wonder and puzzlement. No one else was looking at her though, so she couldn't have missed anything. In fact, they were getting ready to enter the caves to get their kyber crystals. He only looked away long enough to melt the ice block at the entrance, but as she entered the cave behind the others, she could feel his eyes on her again. Once in the cave, she quickly got separated from the other younglings, which was fine with her. They were supposed to go about this alone anyways, and this was her third time here. Her first time, she had to overcome her fear of strangers stemming from the imposter Jedi that had arrived at her village before Plo Koon, and had tried to take her. Her second time for the kyber crystal for the Shoto lightsaber, she had overcome her fear of losing the men in her command, and the insecurities she had about the war. Before she could wonder what it would be this time, so it came to an abrupt stop as the cave around her vanished. She was now standing in a plaza on what looked to be Coruscant. Ahead of her stood Anakin, Obi-Wan, and Plo Koon with Rex, Cody, and Wolf, who were all gazing upon the Jedi Temple in the distance. Looking down herself, she found that she was 17 again. Her death and going back in time couldn't have all been a dream. No, more accurately a nightmare. She didn't care and started running to the Jedi and clones, wanting to be with them again. However, before she could even cover half the distance, Rex, Cody, and Wolf slowly raised their blasters at their respective Jedi generals. She yelled at them, but they didn't seem to hear her as the troopers all started shooting, and Anakin, Obi-Wan, and Plo Koon fell to the ground. Shock and pain now forever etched on their faces. The Jedi Temple on the horizon started burning and screams echoed from it. Ahsoka stopped running towards them and started running the opposite direction as clones swarmed the plaza, all their blasters aimed at her with Rex being the foremost. He raised his pistols, and with his first shot, the rest of the clones started firing as well. Ahsoka blinked and found herself in a forest. Her confusion didn't last long, and she was more grateful for the trees that offered cover and protection from the clones as she continued to desperately evade them. As she continued to run as fast as she could though, each of the pounding steps behind her made her panic and her fear was beginning to overwhelm her. A cackling like she had never heard before soon echoed through the forest, followed by a heavy, mechanical breathing. She stumbled and fell, the sound overbearing for her, and she dragged herself behind a tree as the deaths of thousands of Jedi began hitting her again. Ahsoka was beginning to lose herself from the misery when Rex's words came to mind. He had told her to find Fives, in an unsteady tone before they shot her. The memory of his face came a moment after, tears sliding down his cheek, eyes dilated like he was possessed, lip quivering. She remembered his helmet hitting the ground, the sound echoing in the deafening silence as his hands shook uncontrollably. Then he stilled immediately as he pulled his blaster. It was as if he's being controlled, being forced to do something he didn't want to do. Ahsoka dragged herself to her feet, using the tree for support. Peeking around the tree, she scanned the swarm of troopers that were hunting her, looking for the distinctive armor of Rex. All the clones before her wore plain white armor, and she couldn't see behind them as the clones were still taller than her. She slowly climbed up the tree and quietly moved through the branches from one tree to another, scanning the clones beneath along the way. A glint of blue made her stop as she crept closer to Rex. He had stopped moving, his helmeted face looking deep into the forest. She dropped to the ground behind him and carefully approached, but he still didn't move. Ahsoka reached him and gently turned him to face her. He moved easily like he was an empty shell, devoid of his own will. She reached up, slowly and carefully removing his helmet. Tears were sliding down his cheeks again, but as soon as his eyes met her, they focused. In a wavering tone, he apologized to her for killing her, for causing her pain, for breaking her trust instead of being there for her when she needed it. Ahsoka grabbed him and pulled him into a hug, letting him cry on her shoulder as her own silent tears fell on him. In a wavering voice, she reassured him, telling him that she now knew that it wasn't his fault or any of the clones, that she had partially held him responsible and feared him, but not anymore, and didn't blame any of them. They were her brothers, and she was their sister. Ahsoka could feel him start to fade, and she managed to whisper goodbye before he was completely gone, closing her eyes and sinking to her knees once his form vanished. When she opened them again, she was surrounded by darkness, but the daughter stood in front of her form emitting a soft but strong light. She told her that a lot of little things had come together to give her this chance, a chance to make things right. The daughter reached out her hand, grasping Ahsoka's, then firmly placed 2 kyber crystals in it before folding her fingers over them. She told her she had faith in her, before things went completely black. The next thing Ahsoka noticed was the fact that she was laying on the ground, her cheek resting against a cold stone. Gingerly sitting up, she remembered that she was in the crystal caves. Opening her hand, the 2 kyber crystals the daughter had given her shined softly. Her head was fuzzy, but she felt she had a new clarity. Wiping the tears that were sliding down her cheeks, she slowly summoned towards the entrance of the cave. By the time she reached it, the ice had already covered it again. She knew the warning they had told the younglings before they entered the cave, that if they didn't make out before the ice reforms, then they would be trapped. It was a lie. It was just ice, and what was ice to the Force? It was one's fear that trapped them. Gently placing her hand on the ice, she showered a hole big enough for her to walk through. Coming out into the main hall of the temple, only Grand Master Yoda remained. The Jedi that accompanied them must have taken the other younglings back to the ship. Yoda looked up from his meditation as she approached and asked if she had gone what she had come here for. Ahsoka replied that she had, and was surprised to hear how shaky her voice was. Yoda continued, asking if she had overcome a fear, or perhaps learned something new. She simply nodded this time, to which Grandmaster Yoda got up and beckoned her to follow. He led her back to the ship where the other younglings were starting to build their lightsabers with Master Hu Ying. When she walked into the ship behind Yoda, they all looked at her in surprise. They still avoided her though as she went into an empty area to start building her lightsabers. All the necessary parts for a single lightsaber were already there waiting for her, so she bought time by arranging them. She didn't want to attract attention by appearing to know what she was doing, so she would wait till some of the others constructed theirs first. However, Hu Ying comes to her, having finished giving personal instructions to the rest of the younglings, it now being her turn. He comments that it's been a while since the youngling had brought 2 kyber crystals, and goes about quickly doubling the components in front of her, as well as adding a few accessories he thought would go well. When he finishes, and she still doesn't move, he correctly guesses that she doesn't want to draw attention and outshine the others. Hu Ying insists that she should not mind the others, that she should only focus on herself, for herself. Ahsoka hesitates and heeds him, though only after glancing over to make sure no one was watching. Wanting it over with, she swiftly places the 2 kyber crystals in the center of the parts, closes her eyes and starts meditating. She skillfully but quickly arranges the parts of both lightsabers at once, wanting to finish as soon as possible before anyone got curious and looked over. The lightsabers were built with kyber crystals at its core, so we started with them, then started attaching parts and wires. A process that requires so much precision and skill that only a Force user could do it. Ahsoka quickly finished the two lightsabers at the same time and opened her eyes, letting her new lightsabers gently fall into her hands. They were different from her previous sabers. Instead of the typical lightsaber shape, they were thinner, slightly longer, though her shoulder was again shorter than her main one, and they had a slight curve. They resembled the sword handles of old, and both of them had two diamond shapes on either side. She was about to ignite them when she finally became aware of her surroundings again, and she realized that all eyes were in fact on her. Huying was the first to speak though, unfazed as ever, commenting that this was the first time he had seen lightsabers such as hers, that they were truly unique and one of a kind. This didn't help and only made Ahsoka want to hide more, as she was now for certain the center of attention, something she hadn't wanted to happen. A youngling her age shouldn't be with a class whose other students were 2 years older than her and participating in a gathering, nor should someone as young as her be able to build two lightsabers at once on their first try. She should have at least taken her time, slowly doing one at a time instead of rushing through it. It was foolish of her to believe that her actions wouldn't be noticed if she was just quick. Thankfully though, Huying seemed to understand and prompted to get the other younglings back on task, just as she was about to actually hide from their gazes. All they could hopefully do anyway was just spread rumors and bully her. This just left the eyes of Grandmaster Yoda and the other Jedi on her, though he went to the other younglings at the prompting of Yoda, who made his way to her. She couldn't help but grip her new lightsabers tightly and lower her head as he approached, embarrassed and ashamed that she was this foolish. When he reached her, he patted her hand, which was turning white around the lightsabers. He told her that this was nothing to be sad about, and said she should hold her head high, and be proud as he was proud of her and Plo Koon would soon be, and that it brought him joy that the future of the Jedi Order would have Jedi such as her. Once he finished, he left the room, and Ahsoka made herself comfortable in a corner and watched the other younglings build their lightsabers. She wanted to ignite her lightsabers, but forced herself to wait. She didn't want to be the center of attention again. She just hoped that she would at least make it back to Coruscant into their classes before she got herself into the spotlight once again. The trip back to Coruscant thing went smoothly, and the other younglings all managed to build their respective lightsabers before they arrived. They were told that they would be given a day to rest before the training continued, though Battlemaster Androlic was eagerly waiting for Ahsoka when the shuttle landed. He was curious about her experience and was eager to begin training her using her new lightsabers. Though once she vaguely told him about her time in the cave, then showed him her lightsabers and told him how she constructed them, he relaxed and eased back a little. He told her that he would let her rest, but had expected a training session with them first thing in the morning, warning her that real lightsabers were very different from training ones. To which she replied that she understood and would look forward to it, and she did. She was relieved to have lightsabers again. Their film and presence by her side gave her comfort, and she wanted to use them like she used to twirl around with them, completely at ease and one with herself. It reminded her when she had refused to rejoin the Order, how lost she had felt without her lightsaber swinging from her hip, and how relieved she was when Anakin could give them to her again before the Siege of Mandalore. Ahsoka and Sindrolic talked a bit more as they guided her to her new dorm room with her new clanmates. It would be where she would be staying from now on until she became a Padawan and got a master, until she became Anakin's apprentice. So I had all to think about, so after saying goodbye to Sindrolic, she simply lay in her new bed as her clanmates excitedly talked amongst themselves. What had the daughter meant when she had said that this was a chance to make things right? Was she really responsible for stopping the future that she had experienced? She had to be. What else could the daughter have meant? And what little things had happened to trigger this? It gave her some comfort and relief though, that the daughter had said that she had faith in Ahsoka. She also thought of Anakin. Where was he and what was he doing? He should be about 14 right now, though he was already apprenticed to Obi-Wan. She wondered if she could meet him. He definitely would be in the library or other usual places that she visited, besides maybe the training room and mess hall. She would have to get lucky to meet him in the mess hall though, but the training rooms would be a better bet. She knew that he had also trained with Sindrolic as well as some droids that he had built. She felt that perhaps she shouldn't meet him before the Battle of Christophsis, but she didn't really care as she had already changed so much of her life and she quickly resolved to find him. They had shared experiences in the temple, both being lonely and outcasts, but ahead of their peers. So perhaps both their lives could get better by becoming friends earlier on. The day had been a long one, and she was drained both physically and mentally, but she still couldn't seem to sleep. Restless, she soon got up and dragged herself out of bed. And, with her new lightsabers at her waist, she spent the rest of the day in the library, lazily reading some reports on a battle that took place over 1,000 years ago. The next morning, Ahsoka met Sandralik in the training center, and after he greeted her and told her what he was going to try to review with her that day, this time with real lightsabers, he urged her to ignite hers. He had correctly guessed that she hadn't ignited them yet, unlike her clanmates, but she didn't care too much about it. She had ignited her lightsabers thousands of times, and she could already envision the greenish yellow blades protruding from her new lightsaber hilts. Though Anakin's blue touch ones came to mind as well, and she couldn't help a small smile. Anyway, igniting a lightsaber was nothing new to her, but she still tried to feign excitement, not wanting to arouse suspicion from Sandralik. However, both of them gasped as she ignited her lightsabers and saw their pure white color, and they stared in all wonder for several minutes at the unique and unheard of color. Sandralik broke the silence first, commenting that this was the first time he had seen or heard of such color, and would have to do extensive research on it later. Refocusing, he told her that now he wanted to see them in action and test her using real lightsabers even more. Ahsoka soon regretted not resting the evening before as Sandralik pushed her hard, but though her body wasn't used to it yet, her sense of lightsaber combat was still there. He praised her for it and called her a prodigy, but she felt guilty about it. She had 3 years of combat to hone her skills and instinct, so she didn't really feel that she was too exceptional anymore. During those 3 years, she had also mostly stuck with a variant of Form 5 that accommodated her dual-wielding reverse grip. It was a form that didn't fit her stature, but instead fit well with hers and Anakin's personality. Now, she kind of regretted focusing solely on it, and wanted to become proficient in all the forms, though her Form 5 variant would likely still be the ace up her sleeve. Its uniqueness and unpredictability had won her many duels, and would likely win her many more. Days began to pass where she went back and forth between taking lessons with her new clanmates and lessons with Sandralik, and she steadily improved as she rehoned and trained her body, and rebalanced herself in the Force. Word was spread of her unique lightsaber color and style though, and it only further ostracized her from her clan. It got to the point where she kinda missed her old clan, who at least talked to her and acknowledged her existence. This new one seemed to hate how different she was and ignored her to the point where she didn't exist to them. That was except for a single member though, a female Cage, whose name was Fari. She was kind to Ahsoka, and she appeared to be fascinated with her, admiring and looking up to her. Togru's were a naturally social race, and even though Ahsoka thought she would have been fine as she was before, she was still thankful that Fari was there to be her friend, with Fari always being eager to be with Ahsoka. She also ran into Plo Koon several times since her trip to Ilum, and though he seemed to sense something was off, he didn't say anything, instead openly accepting her new self. Him and Sandralik though were the only other ones she really talked to and bonded with, which was honestly better than her previous life where she only had Plo Koon, but still worse than what was expected from her. Luck seemed to be on her side though, as one day, while she was waiting for Sandralik and wandering the training rooms, she happened upon Anakin practicing against a droid. She watched him till he finished, and he noticed that the droid's combat form resembled Maul's. Once he defeated it, he turned to face her. She quickly tried to start up a conversation, but Anakin wasn't too keen on it. Instead of turning back to his droid and gathering it up, ignoring her. She had to give up a moment later as Sandralik found and called to her. He didn't say anything to Anakin, just giving a polite but apologetic smile, and guided Ahsoka back to the training room. He told her that it was good of her to try to make friends, but only if they wanted to be friends. Ahsoka mumbled her understanding before they got into their mock duel. However, she knew her attempt had paid off as she sensed Anakin watching on the door. If there was something she knew he couldn't pass up on, it was a good fight. It took a couple of days before they ran into each other again though. As soon as they did, Anakin quickly requested that they duel, which she eagerly accepted. Sandralik, who had been with her, was a bit hesitant, believing Anakin was too far ahead of Ahsoka, though he relented knowing that he was here to stop the duel if necessary, and that Ahsoka needed someone smaller than him to actually duel her, for her to really improve. As they prepared for the duel, Ahsoka could see that Anakin was cocky and she knew he had the right to be. He was older, bigger, and had potential, but Ahsoka knew she had the upper hand, even with her smaller size and age gap. Anakin didn't know how she fought, but she knew Anakin's style intimately, if it was still the same. Once Sandralik started the duel, she let Anakin attack her to verify that it was still the same style, before pushing an attack, targeting his weak points and unbalancing him, subsequently disarming him and quickly winning the first duel. Both Sandralik and Anakin were shocked, but Anakin was more annoyed and he quickly demanded a rematch, to which Ahsoka eagerly agreed. It was nice to beat Anakin, something that she had only accomplished late into the second year of the war. From then on, when Anakin was in the temple, Ahsoka was usually by his side along with Fari on occasions when time permitted, whether they were eating, dueling, or tinkering with the droids. They quickly became good friends again, and she even got him to go to the library with her a few times. One evening, while they were in his room working on repairing a droid that he had used for training earlier that day, he offhandedly asked if she remembered her parents, or at least her mother. Ahsoka knew that Fari did. Cage formed memories almost from birth, but hesitantly, she told him that she didn't know if she remembered her mother's face correctly, but she did remember her presence. And Anakin's confused look, she explained about how she was good at sensing things and people, and even how she knew when a man impostoring a Jedi had tried to take it before Plo Koon had come. Anakin listened intently. It was something she had never told him before. Only Plo Koon and a few others had known. When she finished, Anakin was silent for a moment, though he soon spoke. He told that he had entered the Order at the age of 9, and of his mother who had still been a slave on Tatooine when he had left. She had wished him a good life, which she was living, but he worried about her and wondered if she was alright. He couldn't do anything though, and Obi-Wan was with the Jedi High Council in the aspect that they want him to forget about her, for him to sever his connection with her. Ahsoka knew about the Jedi's harsh view on attachments, and also knew a lot about Anakin's early situation, but he had refused to mention his mother before. Ahsoka, fearing the worst that previously happened to his mother, wanted to do something about it before it could happen again. When she next encounters Plo Koon, she mentions it to him, asks if he could free her. With a sigh, he calls her by her nickname, Little Ahsoka, and reminds her that attachments were forbidden, and, though Anakin's case was special, it was his personal life and his struggle, something that he had to overcome. He had no right to meddle, especially when the Council didn't wish for it. Ahsoka counters though, saying that Anakin was already attached, but he might grow out of it with time. However, the worry for his mother kept her constantly on his mind, making it impossible for him to forget about her. And if she would be hurt or even killed while he was here trying to be the perfect Jedi, then the guilt would stick with him forever, and he would be permanently attached to her with all the wrong emotions. Plo Koon stayed silent for a moment, but then relented, saying that she sounded a lot older than she was, but he understood what she was saying and would at least go check on the situation. But he would have to ask the Council for their approval before he thought of freeing her. As he turned to leave, Ahsoka calls after him, telling him that sometimes it is better to ask for forgiveness than permission, especially when one doesn't fully understand the situation. Ahsoka was hopeful at first, though after a week with no news and no sign of Plo Koon, she started to become disheartened. However, on her way to meet Anakin over a week later, she happens upon him being pulled aside by Plo Koon, who looked a bit worse for wear. He tells Anakin that his mother was safe and currently residing in Alderaan, though now he would have to focus on breaking his attachment to her and put her out of his mind. Anakin readily agreed and thanked him profusely, to which Plo Koon just patted his shoulder before he excused himself. When he walked past Ahsoka, he paused and greeted her, calling her Little Ahsoka again, and even though his mask covered his mouth, she knew that he was smiling. Before he could continue on, she gave him a quick hug and thanked him, telling him that she would make it up for him. He just chuckled and told her that she didn't owe him anything, that the experience was quite rewarding already. Over the next several weeks, Anakin was in high spirits, and life at the temple was good for them. Ahsoka quickly improved in her lightsaber styles and fitness, and her duels with Anakin, which had quickly turned into her losing every one, were beginning to be more often draws and straight defeats. Sindralix still refused to actually duel her, no matter how much she begged, and only did mock duels with her, but she was still thankful for this guidance. She also dueled with Fari, who was behind her in terms of skill but close to her age and stature, making it easy for Ahsoka to fight and learn from. Cage were also generally very fast and athletic, so technically Fari was ahead of Ahsoka in terms of her body as well. During their duels, Ahsoka shared tips with her that she had learned to overcome their smaller sizes, that she knew would continue to be an issue even when they grew up. She enjoyed doing mock duels with Fari, letting Fari go all out against her while she just defended, or Fari defended while Ahsoka attacked. Though she did go easy on Fari when she did that. They both learned a lot from each other and improved quickly, especially Fari. Ahsoka even began to look forward to more of their duels over hers and Anakin's. Ahsoka also learned about many of the battles and tactics used in the previous Sith Wars, some of which the Sith actually had droids as well. However, strangely enough, she found nothing on modern battle droids, even with it being after the Battle of Naboo. Not only that, but the location of Kamino and the Kaminoans in general weren't in the archives either. Once the war started, almost every Jedi knew the location of Kamino, and she had heard that the Kaminoan cloning had been used prior to the war as well. So why was it in the archives? She asked Jocasta knew if there were any instances where information could get lost, to which she replied there wasn't. There was no way for information to just disappear from the archives. Though, as Ahsoka turned to leave, she added that unless a Jedi Master had deleted it, as they were told how. However, they could only do that with the Council's permission, and she would know if that was the case. That struck something for Ahsoka. Count Dooku had been a master before he had left the Order, and she knew that the clone donor was a bounty hunter that had been employed by Count Dooku when he had been killed. Plo Koon also told her before that the army had been commissioned by Sifo Dyas, but not only had he gone missing, but he had also been a friend of Count Dooku's. They didn't know where he got the money for the clones from. Could Count Dooku be behind the clone army? But why? Why would he create an army that he had to fight in the future? Her next thought made her still. Unless he is playing the long game to ultimately defeat the Republic. She was certain the clones, or at least Rex, haven't forced her on the Jedi Republic, so perhaps there had been something the Kaminoans had done to them to make them into unthinking droids, to force them to betray the Republic. Is that what had happened before? He deemed the time right and activated whatever it was? No, it couldn't be. Obi-Wan had told her that Anakin had killed him before it had happened. It could have definitely been someone else though, like General Grievous. That was most likely the case. If the clones would turn on them, then the Republic would quickly fall. But then why had the Jedi Councilman wary of Palpatine and sent Anakin to spy on him? Was it just because they had grown greedy for power? So I couldn't hope to know, but one thing she was now certain of was that Dooku was at least partially responsible for the clone army and their eventual betrayal. Ahsoka wanted to investigate more, but there was nothing she could do. She could try to get someone to go to Kamino. She knew the coordinates and hyperspace lane by heart, but there wasn't much that could be accomplished by doing that, and she wasn't sure who to trust either. If the wrong person got told, then she couldn't even imagine what could happen. She'd have to wait till the clones became known before continuing her investigation. She still went to the library on occasions, but instead began focusing more of her time with Fari and Anakin and her lightsaber training in general. Months soon turned to years, and year 3628 ATC dawned and her 11th birthday drew near. As she got older, her skill and knowledge began to show that they far outclassed almost everyone else around her age, even surpassing Anakin in some aspects. Ahsoka heard from Plo Koon that the Jedi Council had been debating on making her a Padawan due to her knowledge, skill, and determination she showcased. But they were hesitant as she didn't interact much at all with any other Jedi besides Fari, Plo Koon, Anakin, and Dralik. So that it was unlikely they'd make her a Padawan because of this. Some of the council wanted her to continue with her clan and continue trying to make friends, and she was perfectly fine with this. It hadn't occurred to her that they might make her a Padawan before they did previously, and it was a wake-up call that she had already changed the future, however small her impact had been so far. She didn't want to become a Padawan yet. She wanted to become Anakin's Padawan again, and they haven't been knighted yet. She continued on with her life as normal, though there was practically nothing left in the library that she hadn't read yet, or that she was allowed to read. Anakin wasn't at the temple as often as before either, Obi-Wan taking him on most of his missions. Though when he was in the temple, they often sparred and Obi-Wan sometimes came to watch. When they were out, she most stuck with Fari, who was arguably now a close friend to Anakin. They had made a few more friends or acquaintances over the years, though most of them just wanted to learn from them. Only a few tried to be actual friends, but Anakin and Ahsoka were both grateful that there were at least some people who wanted to be close. Besides them, Plo Koon had his own things he needed to do, and Dralik, though he still gave her tips and instructions, had his job and other people to train. So, she began meditating more. When she got bored of that, she began trying different force techniques out of curiosity. Fari often joined her, always interested and curious at what Ahsoka was up to, and it was while she was meditating under the great tree with Fari one evening that Morai made an appearance. Ahsoka had first seen the convoy when she, Anakin, and Obi-Wan had been taken to Mortis, but she had caught glances of her on several occasions after that. Never, though, had she landed on Ahsoka's shoulder as she did now. All Ahsoka and Fari could do was stare at Morai for several moments before Fari wondered if she could pet her. Without waiting for a response, she slowly raised her hand and gently stroked Morai's head. It only lasted a moment though, before she flew off and landed on the great tree in front of them. Fari asked Ahsoka if she knew the convoy, and Ahsoka debated on telling the truth. Not wanting to lie to her though, she admitted that she did, telling her that her name was Morai. She didn't go deeper, instead telling her that she had seen her following her. Fari asked why she had named it Morai, and all Ahsoka could muster was that she had seen the name in some text and had stuck with her. From then on, she often saw Morai, whether it was through a window or flying above when she went outside. The sight often caught other Jedi's attention as well, but thankfully, Morai only landed on her or by her when there was no one else around besides Fari. Ahsoka grew accustomed to having Morai around and began to spend more time outside to be with her, even kind of wishing she could leave the temple and course on itself, so she could be free with her like she used to be when she was at least a Padawan. It disheartened her a bit, especially since she now felt that she shouldn't leave the Jedi Order anymore, so that she could prevent the future that still haunted her nightmares. But the daughter had told her that she had faith in Ahsoka, and Morai was proof of that, though she wondered why she had only appeared now, and not when she had met the daughter. As a Jedi, she had been raised to be selfless and sacrifice life if needed, so she was willing to do not what she wanted, but what was needed of her, even if she became miserable, because she knew what was at stake. She was just sick of being a kid still. Her body was still too small and weak, even with all the training she was doing, and everyone constantly underestimated and looked down on her. She just wondered why she had to go back in time this far, and not just when the war started. Still, there was nothing she could do about it, but continue to wait. Things thankfully remained uneventful for a while after that, and Ahsoka thought that life was going as well as possible, and everything was mostly on track. That is, until just before her 11th birthday, when the High Council summoned her. When she appeared before them, Master Windu told her that they had come to an agreement that she was ready to be made a Padawan, so that she could continue her journey and grow and learn. Ahsoka's heart dropped as he continued, saying that they had considered having her participate in the Padawan trials, but decided that there was no need as her skill was already apparent, and several Jedi were already asking for her to be their apprentice. Ahsoka was about to protest, but the words died in her throat. What could she say? That she wanted to be Anakin's apprentice because she was before? The Jedi High Council seemed to be waiting for a response, watching her, so lacking anything to say, she simply nodded. It seemed enough, and Master Windu continued, saying that Plo Koon was the foremost that wanted her, but they had felt they were too close, so decided against it. This only had hurt Ahsoka as she realized that she had perhaps ruined her chances of being Anakin's apprentice again, by becoming his friend before she was assigned as his Padawan. Master Windu kept talking though, saying that after much deliberation, they had decided that her master would be Jedi Master Sora Bulk. Ahsoka stilled, frozen by the name. Sora Bulk, someone who had previously left and betrayed the Jedi Order after joining Count Dooku. He was going to be her master. The Council had perhaps picked the worst person to be her mentor. Ahsoka stood in the center of the High Council chamber, Sora Bulk's name still resonating off the walls. She wasn't sure if the Council was expecting her to do or say anything, but she was sure that they wouldn't like it if she expressed the panic and dread that started racing through her. It was only silent for a moment long before Master Windu stood and told Ahsoka to follow him, that he would take her to meet her master. He guided her into the elevator of the spire, then through the temple, a maze of corridors and rooms that she and most other Jedi had memorized. Master Windu led her into the living area of the Masters and guided her directly to a room whose door was just like the rest. Ahsoka had once found it hard navigating through the temple, and had often gone lost when she was assigned as Anakin's apprentice, trying to find his room and hers. It hadn't helped that they had been more often on the front line rather than in the temple though, but Ahsoka had eventually figured it out with Anakin's help, who had seemed all too eager to allow her to get lost before finally finding her way, with a little bit of his help. Master Windu knocked on the door before letting himself in. Inside was a room that looked like all the others, except in this one sat a weak way staring at a holopad. He looked up and promptly stood when he saw who was entering. Master Windu and Master Bulk greeted each other before Master Bulk turned towards her and Master Windu introduced them. He told her that this was Sora Bulk, her master, explaining that the main reason they had paired them was because he was one of the greatest duelists in the Order, even rivaling himself, and was the co-developer of a pod. Ahsoka bowed and greeted him, telling him that it was an honor to be his Padawan. He smiled back and warmly greeted her as well, urging her to be at ease around him. He was so positive and joyful that it unnerved her. It was convincing, like he hadn't fallen to the dark side yet, at least if it wasn't for that tinge of darkness that she sensed from him. Ahsoka sensed the darkness in Anakin before, something that he was thankfully free from now, but he had only used it as a tool, something he had demonstrated. He had shown her that sometimes, tapping into the dark side was necessary to survive and achieve the best outcome, as long as you didn't let it consume you. She learned that the light side was all about life and peace, while the dark was death and destruction, that one had to use the dark side in order to fight effectively, especially in a gruesome war. and that the dark side had to be present for there to be balance, like the cycle of life. Ahsoka realized that Master Bulk must have been tempted when he was helping Master Windu create the pod, and he had likely given in the urge. Master Windu, excusing himself, interrupted her thoughts, and, as he left, Master Bulk beckoned her to follow him to the table inside the room. He sat down where he was sitting before, beckoning her again to sit across from him, which she did. He told her that they should start by getting to know each other a little first by some simple questions. He told her who his master had been, what he'd like to do, and how helping create the pod was his greatest achievement, along with a few other things. He then asked her what she liked to do, wanted to do, and wanted to achieve. Ahsoka answered as honestly as she dared, and told him her previous goals when she had been first made a Padawan. They talked for a bit more before Master Bulk told her that upon being informed of him receiving her as a Padawan, he had also requested that they have adjoining rooms so that he could better train her. Ahsoka was unsettled by this, still not completely trusting him, but relented when he asked if she would like to see it as she was curious. He guided her to a door which she hadn't noticed on the right side of the room and opened it for her. She stepped inside and, well, the room looked similar to the previous one at the temple when she had been Anakin's apprentice, though they were of course not connected. It was small with plain walls, and the sole window looked out on the galactic city skyline. The only furniture was a simple bed and desk, like in most rooms, and then what had to be the door that led to the hallway on the right. She turned around to Master Bulk, who was standing in the doorway, and thanked him, to which he just chuckled, waving his hand dismissively, telling her that he had been envious of masters who had asked for adjoining rooms when he was a Padawan, so he figured that he would give her one. He sounded genuine, and Ahsoka started to think that he hadn't actually completely fallen yet, that he was just experiencing emotions like any sentient should, and it made Ahsoka more at ease. He continued, saying that he would help her move over a few things here, but then he would give her the rest of the day to get accustomed to her new life and status, and that she could do what she wanted, though he did want her to at least have dinner with him. Ahsoka told him that she understood and thanked him again, before walking by his side back to the youngling dorm room of her clan. When they arrived, she found that most of her clan was there, which was a mixed blessing. Word had most likely spread of her being made a Padawan ahead of them, something that would be confirmed by Master Bulk's presence, and it would only further ostracize her from them. She didn't want Master Bulk to see this. However, she also wanted to at least tell Fari the news herself, even if she knew already. She didn't want to be separated from her, but understood that it was necessary and wanted their friendship to continue. Ahsoka spotted Fari by her bed, and as soon as she saw her, they quickly closed the distance and embraced. Fari congratulated Ahsoka and was genuinely happy for her, which made Ahsoka happy as well. Ahsoka introduced Master Bulk to her before telling her that she would seek her out whenever she was in the temple, and would try to talk to her via comlink as well when out on missions. That got Fari excited, and she made Ahsoka promise to tell her all about the world she went to and the people she met. After their rushed conversation, Fari helped Ahsoka gather a few belongings, mostly clothes. Then with a final hug and goodbye, they parted ways for the time being. Ahsoka was thankful that Master Bulk had patiently waited for her. Though looking at him, it appeared he found their interaction amusing, which made Ahsoka slightly embarrassed. For the rest of the day, Ahsoka got herself comfortable in her new accommodations and tried to become close to Master Bulk, which seemed to make him happy. She knew that she needed to form a bond with him, but she was still a bit wary, so she hoped that talking with him would bring her peace, and it somewhat did. As she lay on her new bed that night, she wondered that perhaps this is why Mirai only appeared recently, to give her comfort for this new challenge she was going to face. For the next several weeks, Master Bulk stayed in the Jedi Temple with Ahsoka and tested her, assessing her skills, level, and capabilities. Once finished, and appearing impressed with the results, he announced that he was going to take her on a tour of sorts across the upper levels of Coruscant. They set out first thing in the morning the next day, and the entire thing was uneventful. She already knew nearly the entire upper levels of Coruscant, and even some of the depths from when she had first hid then lived down there. Master Bulk didn't take her down there, which she understood why, but knowing now that the Jedi Order couldn't even bring peace and safety to their own backyard just showed how corrupt and complacent the Order had become. After his tour, Master Bulk, who deemed that she was ready, started taking Ahsoka on almost every mission the Jedi Council gave him, of course exempting her from the most dangerous ones, though there's practically none of those. They did find themselves unexpectedly having to defend themselves and sometimes others on a few occasions, but thankfully none of those instances were too severe or lasted long. Master Bulk used them to further teach Ahsoka. When they weren't on missions, Master Bulk often took Ahsoka to worlds that he either deemed needed help or guidance, or worlds that are unique and unnatural to help Ahsoka familiarize herself with the vastness and uniqueness of the galaxy. It was on one of these worlds that Master Bulk admitted to her that it was his wish to pass on his greatest achievement to her and teach her the variant of Form 7 that he and Master Windu had created. He wanted to teach her how to use a pod. Ahsoka was taken back and hesitant as he continued, saying that it was risky as she had to overcome the dark side and not let it control her, something that might be difficult especially since she was still young. But she was already well versed in all the other lightsaber forms, so there wasn't much else he could teach her using those. He desperately wanted to pass on his wisdom, but would only do so if she wished for it. Ahsoka knew the risks. The slight taint of the dark side emanating from Bulk was proof of it. But she had overcome the dark side on many occasions and had, over the years, become well balanced in the Force. So that wasn't much of a concern for her. What concerned her was that Master Bulk was not only willing, but eager to teach her something that was supposed to be a dangerous secret form that Master Windu had helped create. Something that he wasn't even asking permission from to teach others, and a child at that. Still, Ahsoka was curious and wanted to learn everything she could to get the upper hand in any situation. So, albeit hesitantly, she accepted Master Bulk's offer, which got him excited. From then on, he began teaching her the basics of a pod and the techniques behind it, coaching her through the tough and arduous training conditioning. He explained that a pod was a state of mind rather than just a fighting style, one that allowed the wielder to channel their inner darkness into the duel. After several of these sessions, Ahsoka noticed that he only instructed and taught her when they were past the mid-rim, and that concerned her. But she was already infatuated with the form and the challenge of learning it, making her not want to stop. Ahsoka quickly mastered the movement of the form, which appeared unconnected, and memorized the techniques needed to channel her inner darkness. But she still had to prove that she could channel her darkness and do it while using the form. For this, she had to connect her inner darkness, her inner strength and emotions, and use them to fuel her but not let them consume her. She used powerful bursts of the Force while attacking and enjoy the fight, relishing in victory, but keeping a calm and clear mind. Master Bulk only wanted her to practice this when in his presence, but Ahsoka was cocky, and did it whenever she could, though she did limit it to only when she was outside the Jedi Temple. Over the months that turned into years, with years 3630 ATC beginning, she began to get the hang of the form, though she had recently realized that she had been coming dangerously close to the dark side because of her arrogance, and started to practice with her inner darkness in moderation, understanding that she had been seeking out far too often. Master Bulk didn't seem to notice any of this though, instead praising her for her rapid progress and control. She had gone from not being able to understand his demonstrations to being able to distinguish his every move, even with his movements being a blur. They had become closer and a bond had formed between them, though Ahsoka still forced her to be wary around him, not wanting to be caught off guard and hurt if he suddenly betrayed her in the Jedi Order. Besides that, she had met Anakin on missions, and on the rare chance that they were in the temple together, they sparred and talked as much as possible. She was also in near constant contact with Fari, contacting her every few days, constantly seeking out the temple. This had become harder as Fari had recently gone through the Padawan trials, and a Keldor Jedi Knight, Warren Dal, had chosen her as an apprentice, but they still talked and hung out whenever possible. Ahsoka was enjoying life, with her now being freer than she had ever been during the war, and with Mariah flying by her, she was finally beginning to feel at ease and at peace. Master Bulk was hands off with his training as well, wanting her to try things before he got involved to teach her and show her how it's done. As it took her across the galaxy, she saw what it had been like before the war, both the good and bad, the beauty and the pain. It made her sad seeing the desolation of the Outer Rim, but felt good helping them with Master Bulk, and it brought her comfort seeing how peaceful most of the worlds were. After one such aid mission, Master Bulk and Ahsoka were taking off when a transmission from Master Windu came in, telling them to go to Kellex, and to scout in preparation for a Jedi strike team. Master Bulk asked what was going on, and Master Bulk quickly filled him in, telling him that Master Galea had been attacked and taken by Count Dooku while she was on Alderaan. They had tracked them down to the planet of Kellex. Master Bulk argued that he had Ahsoka with him, but Master Windu cut him off, saying that they were the nearest Jedi by far, and arresting Count Dooku and saving Master Galea was more important than safely a Padawan. Master Bulk glumly told him that he understood before ending the communication. Taking a glance back at Ahsoka, she could see the guilt in his eyes as he told her that she would have to accompany him in the Jedi Strike Team, but he hoped that it would be solved peacefully. Looking back at the controls, he quickly flew the shuttle out of the planet's atmosphere, putting Kelix's coordinates in, and jumped into hyperspace. He spent the entire trip giving Ahsoka some final advice on what to do in combat situations when losing, or when facing a Force user, telling her that she should focus on surviving, even if it meant running away. Ahsoka tried to listen but found it hard. She probably knew more about combat than Master Bulk anyway, and she didn't want to run away either. Instead, she mostly wondered what was going on. She didn't remember something like this happened before, and it's still over a year before the first battle of Geonosis and the war was to begin. She found it difficult to concentrate even this as, though the possibility of combat wasn't anything new to her, she was still on edge and her heart was racing. They soon arrived over the Kelix and Master Bulk flew in space for a bit before quickly finding the planet's surface and landing the shuttle. Ahsoka obediently followed him off as he told her that he had sensed Force sensitive nearby, and there appeared to be a group of structures ahead. They walked with inside of them before Master Bulk told her to wait for him while he scouted further. Ahsoka wanted to argue with him that she was better at scouting than him, but held it in, and only nodded. Her trust in him had grown, but she still wasn't completely sure if he still wanted to join Count Dooku, especially with him being right there. She watched him till he disappeared before climbing a tree to not only wait, but to be safe while she reached out with the Force. When she reached out, she felt several Force sensors inside the compound, though most of them were weak in the Force on the dark side emanating from them. She identified the dark presence of Count Dooku, as well as the only light side presence of Master Galea, both Force signatures she had previously felt. She also sensed Master Bulk's dark tinged Force presence, but thankfully, he was still outside the compound. She stayed like that until she felt Master Bulk returning, before coming back to her senses and jumping down from the tree. When Master Bulk came into view, he told her that he had confirmed the location of Master Galea, and now needed to go back to the ship to inform Master Windu of the coordinates. She followed him back to the ship, standing back while he contacted Master Windu. He told them that the Jedi Strike Team was on its way, and that they were to wait for them. Ahsoka wasn't sure how long they waited in silence, but soon enough she heard several ships approach their position. She followed Master Bulk out of the shuttle again, as several more shuttles and starfighters landed around them. As they disembarked their ships, Ahsoka was in awe at the number of Jedi that Master Windu had brought, and wondered if she was missing something. There are easily over 100 Jedi here, and they're only going to go arrest Count Dooku and rescue Master Galea? However, there was no time for her to ask, as Master Windu appeared and began making his way towards the compound in the distance, with Master Bulk by his side, and the rest of the Jedi naturally following. Ahsoka rushed up to the head of the group of the Jedi to be by her master as they walked through the wilderness before entering the compound. The entrance was a large archway rather than a doorway, and the entire place was eerily silent. After several more archways and small clearings, all the while passing by dozens of doors, reached a large courtyard, one big enough that they could have landed all the shuttles and fighters there. As walking into it, Ahsoka felt something off, and apparently so could Master Bulk. Turning, he grabbed her shoulder, bent down and softly told her to go back to the ship. Ahsoka, uneasy, nodded, and turned around, though she wasn't entirely planning on staying on the shuttle. But before she could make her way through the Jedi Strike Team, battle droids were marching through the doors and passageways that surrounded the courtyard, quickly blocking the way that they had come. When they came into sight, all the Jedi ignited their lightsabers and Ahsoka followed suit. Figures appeared on the roof as well and only confirmed their identity as they ignited their crimson lightsabers. Count Dooku walked out a moment later, ahead of the Strike Team on the balcony. He told them to surrender, and he would let them live. Master Windu shot back that instead he should be the one surrendering and face the consequences of his actions. Count Dooku simply told them to just surrender if they changed their minds, and, with a wave of his hand, the battle droids, who had by now filled the courtyard, all started firing. Ahsoka and the Jedi around her started swinging their lightsabers, attempting to block the blaster shots, but it wasn't long before Ahsoka felt the first Jedi die. Glancing over, she just caught the side of his body hitting the ground before she had to focus on the battle. She worked hard to deflect the droids' blast stars back at them, destroying them, and she noticed that several of the Jedi were doing the same or just charging at them. Though they were destroying dozens of droids, the courtyard only seemed to become more packed with them, and Jedi started to rapidly fall. The Jedi soon were no longer in a group, instead spread out, fighting their own battles. Ahsoka's senses screamed at her and she got her lightsaber up in time as a crimson lightsaber swung towards her with killing intent. It was only then that she realized that the Dark Acolytes had also joined in and were picking off Jedi as well. She quickly engaged this Dark Acolyte, and though he was bigger than her, she was more skilled and proficient in the Force. On top of that, as he attacked her, she could tell that he underestimated her. When their blades locked, she gave him the impression of buckling under him, which made him press harder. However, she ducked out of his deadlock, and as she passed and he stumbled forward, she decapitated him with her Shoto. She didn't have time to think of the life she just took as more battle droids continued to flood the plaza, and seeing a column coming through a doorway, Ahsoka threw her Shoto at them, sending through all of them before pulling it back toward the Force. She didn't know how long they had been fighting, but she had long gone numb to the feeling of Jedi dying around her and the fact that she was fighting over their bodies. She used everything she had to fight and must have destroyed hundreds of droids along with killing several more Dark Acolytes. But it seemed never ending and the Jedi Force had already been greatly diminished. She herself didn't know how much longer she could hold out, as her body and arms especially had already long since gone numb. Was this the end? Were she and the rest of the Jedi here just going to die? She caught sight of Master Windu gathering up those that were still alive, and she desperately far away to them, battle droids still filling the plaza. She got there in time to hear Master Windu say that they were going to attempt to break out before they dropped from exhaustion. But before they could continue, the sound of engines could be heard. Looking up, they just managed to catch sight of a Delta 7 Aether sprite fly past. Several more followed, and they began strafing the buildings surrounding the courtyard, destroying them, blocking the entrances into the courtyard. The surviving Jedi seemed to get rejuvenated from this, as, for the first time, the droids around them began to thin as they destroyed them, and no more Dark Acolytes appeared. It all seemed to end abruptly, as the final droids were cut down, and an unnerving calm settled over the courtyard. The surviving Jedi, though still on guard, began to wander amongst the carnage, chucking their fallen for life. Ahsoka joined them. Moments later, several Jedi crested the rubble to join them, being led by Grandmaster Yoda. It was only then that Ahsoka started to let her guard down and look around at the devastation. But instead of looking down at the dead, she tried to look at the survivors that were combing through the wreckage. She started counting them, but stopped short, instead of quickly scanning the area. Her master, Master Bulk, someone who was easily recognizable as a Weequay, was nowhere to be seen. Back on Coruscant, Darth Sidious sat in his darkening office, thinking of his faltering plans. Skywalker had changed. Instead of being lonely and an outcast in the Jedi Order, there were those that welcomed him, and anytime he left the temple, he was always eager to get back. Instead of him becoming close to Amidala, he merely did what he was told and didn't pursue a relationship with her, keeping a healthy distance. He felt that he was losing Skywalker, though he refused to admit that he had completely lost him. His war had yet to begin, and there's plenty of harm and pain that Skywalker and the people he cared about would go through. Skywalker would be his. It was inevitable. He was angry that the Jedi had rescued Skywalker's mother, contrary to his expectations, preventing her from suffering further on Tatooine. And the blame of any indirect harm done to her now would likely fall on the Republic rather than the Jedi, who had already done what they could for her. He had hoped that Darth Tyrannus could have taken her or at least killed her to affect Skywalker. It was the reason he sent him to Alderaan. But instead, he had failed and brought the Jedi's attention to him, though he couldn't say he was disappointed in the results as he read the report. He would just have to wait and see how this situation unfolded. It took hours for the Jedi to collect all their fallen and tend to the injured that had miraculously survived. By the end, it only confirmed that her master, Master Sora Bulk, wasn't among the survivors or the fallen. They had been hesitant to allow Ahsoka to stay in the aftermath and help with the recovery as she was only a Padawan, but relented when she insisted, letting her help search through the rubble, marking bodies for others to drag out. They had set up a makeshift camp just outside the ruins of the compound and had brought the fallen Jedi to the side of it, laying them in neat rows. Ahsoka, taking a break in that camp, gazed upon the destruction, the destroyed buildings and droids, the bodies of dark acolytes that still lay in the rubble, the dozens of rows of forms that lay underneath blankets, and the pile of lightsabers that had accumulated in the center of the camp. Is this what Petrarch Arena was like? Miraculously, Master Glia had survived, having managed to escape and Count Dooku was distracted with them, but that was the best news. Out of the 131 Jedi that Master Windu had gathered to rescue her, only 24 left alive, with a few still missing, including her master. Several hundred more Jedi had stopped by, bringing supplies and retrieving the many ships that now no longer had pilots. Later, after confirming that all the bodies were recovered, Grandmaster Yoda ordered that they were to start taking them back to Coruscant, and he personally told Ahsoka to accompany them and wait at the temple for further news of her master. She complied, but the trip was terrible. Finally had a moment to think, and knowing that dozens of bodies now lay in the shuttle that she was taking. If it wasn't for her training experience, no, the fact that this was her second life, she knew that she would have been among those bodies. When the shuttle finally landed in the Jedi Temple, she found it silent and somber, though to her relief, Fari came running to her as she left the hangar. Ahsoka had been afraid that Master Windu had brought her and her master, and even though she hadn't seen either of them on Kellogg's, she had been scared for her. That fear, along with most of the tension and despair that had built up inside her, dissipated in their embrace, and Ahsoka found herself crying on Fari's shoulder. They stayed together for the rest of the day, not having anything to do, and Anakin soon joined them as the High Council called all Padawans, no matter age or skill, back to the temple. Their masters were likely still dealing with the aftermath of the Battle of Kellogg's, which made the temple unnervingly full of children devoid of adults, save for a few along with the elderly Jedi and temple guards. The next few days passed similarly, and Ahsoka was at the center of attention. All the Padawans and the younglings were curious of what had happened. Some knew of the massacre, but most didn't even know of that. They were just confined to the temple without being told a reason. However, everyone seemed to know that Ahsoka had been involved in whatever had happened. Anakin and Fari helped Ahsoka hide from the attention, but they're also curious, and she didn't mind telling them. During the wait, Ahsoka mostly meditated. She would have preferred to do it under the great tree, but all the attention made her go into more hidden places, though she was able to occasionally meditate in the Room of 1,000 Fountains, which Morai somehow got into. It was there a few days later that Plo Koon found her. He sat beside her and attempted to comfort her by telling her that they had yet to find her master, but they were still optimistic, as they hadn't found his body. Ahsoka was having to tell him the truth. She knew he was alive, but his presence in the Force had grown much darker. Knowing what had previously happened, however much she hated to admit it, she was certain that he had joined hands with Count Dooku. She had spent these last few days trying to come to peace with it, as well as the loss of all those Jedi. The Dara told her she had come back to fix things, to save Jedi. Yet 106 Jedi died around her, and she hadn't been able to do anything about it. What could she really do? She was just a single individual and a child at that. The scene was still etched in her mind, and now going to haunt nightmares alongside Rex's betrayal. Her body had been numb as she gazed upon the scores of dead Jedi littering the ground, their faces blank. She had been surrounded by the dead. People were supposed to be older and more experienced than her, yet there she stood, alive, while they had breathed their last. And it wasn't even supposed to happen. If her knowledge of the future was as useless as it has been, and things were different from before, there was a point of her coming back. Anger coursed through her, making there were doubts and fears, but she channeled it like Master Bulk had taught her. She didn't want Plo Koon to notice her turmoil of emotions. She had to have faith that Dara knew what she was doing, and that she would be able to meet the Dara's expectations. Plo Koon stayed silent a moment longer, as if he was having an eternal debate like her, but he eventually spoke. He told that Master Glia had gone all around the meet with Senator Organa, but that wasn't the only reason. The council decided to investigate the chosen prophecy more, or at least Anakin's part in it. Master Glia had been taken by Count Dooku while she had been defending Anakin's mother. Count Dooku had been after Shmi Skywalker. Ahsoka was frozen by this. not sure what to make of it. She quickly put this aside, however, instead of using this time to talk with Plo Koon in hope that it would help her calm her emotions, which it eventually did. After their talk, she went back to her quiet, lonely room. She was already missing Master Bulk's presence, something she had tried so hard not to get comfortable with. She hadn't wanted to replace Anakin as her master, but it had happened. Gazing out at the galactic city skyline, what Plo Koon said came back to her. Why would Count Dooku be after Anakin's mother? Maul's shocking words of Mandalore came to mind next. He had told her that Anakin was the key to everything, that he had long been groomed for his role as Sidious's new apprentice. Were the Sith really after Anakin? But who could be grooming him? She had faith in Anakin and knew that he would never fall to the dark side and join the Sith. Ahsoka didn't want to question this, but forced herself to. Who could it be? There was no one around him that could or would try to get him to join the dark side, so that had to be... Wait. There was one individual that Ahsoka had always felt uncomfortable around. Someone who seemed to pit Anakin against Jedi and aggravate his emotions. Someone who the High Council had been wary of. Chancellor Palpatine. But he couldn't be a Sith. The Jedi would know. At least, she hoped. Even if he wasn't a Sith though, he could still be an agent of them and be targeting Anakin. Either way, she believed Maul when he had said that Sidious was behind everything, always operating in the shadows. Obi-Wan also told the Council had suspected that Darth Sidious had orchestrated the war and played both sides from the beginning. Ahsoka wanted to take action, to go after the Sidious person, do something to not feel useless, but force herself to think. The future had changed because of the Sith's actions in response to hers. Looking at it like this, it appeared that she had somehow already disrupted their plans. If she could continue to disrupt their plans she knew about or suspected, especially if she could do it without them finding out, then she could effectively beat them by outsmarting them. This had the potential to save many lives, instead of Ahsoka only reacting like she had been thus far. To start this, whether or not Palpatine was involved, asking Anakin to stay away from him or at least be wary of him should suffice in preventing Anakin from being groomed, if that even happened before. She probably couldn't rely on knowing when the war would start, as Jedi shouldn't be arrogant enough to march in the Petrarchy Arena after this incident. At least that is again a hope, but she still couldn't change that. However, the clones would be a good bet. It would be their eventual betrayal that would doom the Republic and the Jedi. If she could figure out how they were forced to turn them, then she could stop it. For this though, she would have to go to Kamino, but without the Kaminoans' knowledge, as she feared they might be involved. This would be near impossible, but she had to try. However, she needed help. She could get Anakin or Farah to come with her, but they wouldn't be able to help much. She needed someone of higher rank, and the one that she still trusted and could help her was Plo Koon. If she requested his help though, then she would have to tell him things that she shouldn't know, and find an explanation for it. Still, she could only do so much by herself as Kellogg had demonstrated, so she needed help if she truly wanted to change the future. After a sleepless night, just as the sun's rays began glistening off the galactic city skyline, she went in search of Plo Koon before he could leave the temple. She found him on his way to the hangar bay, and after a moment's hesitation, she called out to him and asked if they could speak in private. He told her they always had time for her before leading her into a room. Ahsoka wasn't sure if she was ready to tell him everything, so instead, she slowly told him of the clone army, their eventual betrayal, and how she wanted to stop it. Plo Koon was silent for a moment before telling her that he and Grandmaster Yoda had sensed a change in her, and he hoped that she would tell them about it sometime. But he would trust her for now. Most Jedi could tell that something was off, and he hoped that Ahsoka would have some pieces to this puzzle. He asked what her plan was, to which she told him that she needed to sneak into the Kaminoan facility, find a clone, and run a test on him. She just needed someone to distract them while she did this. Plo Koon nodded, looking thoughtful, then asked if she would be fine to bring more Jedi. At Ahsoka's hesitation, he reassured her that it wouldn't be anyone she didn't know, saying that he had Farah and her master in mind as they were both in the temple. Ahsoka too quickly agreed, only thinking of Farah's opinion afterwards, so she promptly added that only if Farah agreed. Plo Plo Koon just chuckled, telling her that he wouldn't have it any other way, and that she should go find Fari and ask, while he got Night Dal and they would meet in the hangar bay. Ahsoka thanked him before running off to find Fari. She had been tempted to ask if Anakin could come as well, but from past experience, she knew that he wasn't ideal for stealth missions. Finding Fari wasn't too hard. A force bond of sorts had formed between them, and they could sense each other, like master and apprentice bond. Ahsoka had tempted not to tell her about this mission and just go meet Plo Koon. She knew that Fari would want to come, but Ahsoka didn't want to put her in danger. However, she knew what it was like to be overprotected, and she didn't want to do that to Fari. She was relieved to find Fari alone in her room, and upon entering, she blurted out she knew bits of the future. She had wanted to tell her for some time now, but had always held back. Her ordeal was hard for even her to believe, and she had experienced it. She hadn't wanted to strain their friendship by claiming such an absurd thing, but on the way here, she had ended up talking herself into it, and wanted to tell her before she backed out again. She didn't say the whole truth though, instead making it sound like she had extremely accurate force visions. Fari was taken aback for a second before bombarding Ahsoka with questions, asking her if she had seen anything about her, or someone sitting out of the temple, and many more such questions. It left Ahsoka speechless until she managed to calm Fari down, relieved with her acceptance, saying she didn't know anything that detailed, but was here to ask if she wanted help her with something. Before Ahsoka could even explain, Fari agreed, and Ahsoka had to calm her down again before explaining the mission. It was like this was her first exciting mission and her first experience bending the rules. On the way to the hangar bay, Ahsoka asked Fari to pay attention to their bond while on Kamino. If she sensed them getting close, then she needed to alert Ahsoka using the bond. Fari was confused about what this meant, so Ahsoka demonstrated, sending some of her emotions she now felt to Fari through the bond. Fari faltered, a surprised look crossing her face before it was replaced by a wild smile and gleaming eyes full of mischief. She eagerly asked Ahsoka how she did it, and it wasn't long before Fari sharing her excitement and joy with Ahsoka. They arrived in the hangar bay to find the two Keldors conversing by a shuttle. They greeted each other once they got close. Night Dal especially warmed to Fari, and Ahsoka felt the happiness and relief from Fari upon talking with her master. They boarded the shuttle and Plo Koon took the controls, finding the order before he stepped back, letting Ahsoka take over. She used a Krillin run hyperspace route to get closer, making jumps to the moon of Rishi. From there, she plugged in the hyperspace coordinates to Kamino, the Anakin had made her memorized. As soon as she jumped the shuttle, she turned back to the three Jedi that were watching her, their gaze a mix of both curiosity and wonder, and some concern. She told them that she would hide on the ship while the Kaminoans greeted them, then sneak into the facility while they were talking and being given a tour, and she hoped to be back on the shuttle before they finished. Night Dal looked at Plo Koon, and he nodded, telling her to listen to Ahsoka. Turned back to the controls, they had arrived over Kamino, and Ahsoka piloted the shuttle down to Dapoka City, landing on one of the closest landing pads to the facility that she knew of. The weather, thankfully, was terrible per usual, but it would help Ahsoka sneak across the exposed walkways. Once landed, as predicted, they didn't have to wait long before Kaminoans came out to greet them. Plo Koon led the three Jedi off the ship, casting one last glance towards Ahsoka before doing so, and greeted them. They were escorted into the facility, and Ahsoka waited a moment long before following them. She made her way through the white hallways, having to take it slow to avoid everyone, but she knew where she was going. She finally made it to the barracks where the clones were living and observed for a minute, making sure they weren't being observed and trying to find a clone to talk to. Only clones appeared to be in the area, but they all looked alike, albeit from minor variations of hair and eye color. She had hoped to find one that she had known, like Rex, but she ended up looking for an outlier, sneaking up to a clone that was alone by the wall. When she got to him, she told him that he needed to come with her. He looked up, a confused look on his face upon seeing her, but shrugged and stood, following her out of the barracks. She led him into a more isolated area before asking his name, then correcting himself quickly to his number. He was CT-1226. She then told him that she needed his help, telling him that she feared the Kaminoans had done something to the clone to make them turn on the Republic. This got his attention, as she knew it would. They had been raised being told that they were to fight for the Republic and defend it with their lives. He asked her what she needed, and she told him that knowing the Kaminoans, they had done something to their brain, so she wanted to medically scan him. He agreed, and followed her to where the medical equipment was. They entered the room and he lay on the table in the center. She thanked him and promised that she wouldn't do anything that would harm him. He just chuckled as he was put to sleep and the scan began. Ahsoka at first patiently waited while it scanned, but as it started taking longer than she anticipated, she started getting nervous. It was almost to the point where she didn't notice that some of that nervousness wasn't from her, but from the Force Bonafari. It was the odd discomfort that came with it that alerted Ahsoka, and she realized that it was a warning that she had asked Fari to give her. But the medical scanners still weren't picking up anything. That couldn't be. There had to be something. Ahsoka placed her hands on the trooper's head and out of desperation started murmuring, "I am one with the Force, and the Force is with me. I am one with the Force, and the Force is with me." Voices could soon be heard in the hallway, but finally the scanner chirped, notifying her that it had found something. Subconsciously, she pressed the button to begin the extraction of whatever it was, and prayed that she wasn't killing the trooper by doing this. The extraction felt like it took ages, but soon completed and Ahsoka only caught a glimpse of what looked to be a tumor before she stuffed it in her pocket. Checking Trooper's vitals, she saw that he was stable and a back patch had already been placed on his head. Conversation outside the door reached her and she desperately used the fear that was racing through her to lift the trooper with the Force in the shadows of the ceiling, before jumping up to join him. The door stood open a moment later and in walked Lama Su, who seemed to be boasting of his people's medical and cloning expertise. He paused as he walked into the room, taking a look around. Ahsoka strained to focus on keeping the trooper suspended in the air with the Force as well as holding on herself, as Lama Su walked under her. He walked over to the medical equipment, took a look around once again, before powering it off and continuing his conversation with the three Jedi. Ahsoka was exhausted by the time they left, but so gently lowered the trooper back to the table before jumping down herself. She was grateful that he hadn't woken up while in midair, but now she needed to wake up so she could get back to the shuttle. He did soon wake, and Ahsoka promptly asked him how he felt. He responded, telling her that he was groggy but felt alright. He then asked her if she found anything, to which she pulled out the tumor-looking thing. She told him that she wasn't sure what it was, but she was certain that it wasn't supposed to be in his head. She asked him how he was going to have the back to patch, to which he told her to let him worry about that. Ahsoka thanked him for his participation before saying goodbye and wishing him well, and that she hoped to see him again. Sitting back to the shuttle wasn't as bad as coming in, though the weather had cleared a bit. Ahsoka waited there for another hour before she felt Fari approaching and the three Jedi soon joined her. They were silent as Plo Koon took the controls and piloted them off Kamino, setting course for Coruscant. Only when they were in hyperspace did they speak, starting with Plo Koon, asking if she had found anything. Ahsoka showed him the tumor-looking thing. He nodded, before saying that they had a lot to tell the council when they got back. He and Night Dog conversed from there, while she and Fari caught each other up on their sides of the story. The tour mostly sounded like what Obi-Wan had told her, though they encountered several more bounty hunters and Mandalorians. The trip back home seemed to take longer, but once they landed in the hangar in the Jedi Temple, Plo Koon escorted them to halls of healing, telling Ahsoka they had summoned all the members of the High Council for a meeting, but first wanted to know what she had found. This got Ahsoka nervous, but she had realized that she should tell them, as she had told Plo Koon, or the faith might just remain the same. Once in the halls of healing, Ahsoka showed the tumors to the head healer, and after some examination, they told him that it appeared to be an organic control chip, one made to force the individual to do something, whether willingly or not. Plo Koon asked if they knew what it was meant to force the individual to do, to which they told him that there was a variety of orders on the chip, over 150, though it appeared the control chip wouldn't activate for some of them. They needed to analyze it further to determine exactly what was going on, but they could look at the orders if they wanted to. Ahsoka rushed through the columns before they could even finish speaking and started scrolling through the orders. None of them matched what had happened, and all of them seemed legit. Her scrolling became faster, and again desperate to find something, but a gentle hand on her shoulder made her stop. She looked up to Plo Koon before looking back down at the console, and stilled. The console had stopped on an order whose description brought back flashes from her nightmares. Order 66. An order to force the clones to kill Jedi. Was that what had happened? The clones didn't turn on the Republic, just the Jedi? She had no way to know for sure, but she had a sinking feeling that it was what had happened. Plo Koon read the order over her shoulder, having seen her pause, but commented that it didn't seem too bad, It would be good if any Jedi fell to the dark side, but it still unnerved him that it was without the Council's permission. But he didn't know what had happened. Ahsoka had to tell him and the Council. They were the ones that could bring about the most change in the future, that could save the most Jedi, both from being killed and falling to the dark side, like Master Bulk. She looked at the Plo Koon, saying she was ready to tell them what had happened to her. He nodded, worry now spreading on his face, saying that if she was sure, then the Council should have gathered by now. He walked with her to the High Council chamber. Once there, he explained what he had seen at Kamino, and now Ahsoka led him there before he took his seat, leaving Ahsoka alone in the center of the room. It took a moment for her to fully gain the courage, but thankfully, the Council seemed patient. When she began though, saying that she had come back from the future, she couldn't stop, the crushing burn of it now being released like a dam bursting. She told them from how the war started all the way to the final days before she and thousands of Jedi were killed. She left out most of the personal details, instead of emphasizing important events and decisions. When she finished, the Council was silent for a long moment. Ki-Adi-Mundi was the first to speak though, questioning if what she said was true. Plo Koon stood up for her, saying not only Kamino, but also her changed presence and skill. They argued amongst themselves, leaving Ahsoka silently stand in the middle, though they occasionally asked her something, but she began to grow disheartened. So I wasn't sure how long it went on before someone interrupted them. It was a head healer from the Halls of Healing. They had finished their analysis of the control chip, so I could have forgotten to mention it, but Plo Koon filled them in, before letting the healer tell them what he had found. The healer told them that the chip could and would take control of whoever was inside of, and they would be helplessly bound to the order for days or even weeks afterwards, unable to think or act for themselves. The orders that were on the chip, though at first glance appeared impressive and legit, were all fake. Some of those orders could trigger, in theory, though there was a small chance. The only order that was tied to the control of the chip was Order 66, the execution of Jedi officers by order of the Chancellor. Master Windu dismisses Ahsoka from the High Council chamber with the order to record everything that she had told them. As she cast one last look at the council members, she could tell that there were only a few that believed her. It was the fact that the healer had brought about the chips that had convinced them to do anything. Her experience and testimony was just a story for them, a fairy tale. Their lack of faith and trust in her brought back memories of when they had kicked her out of the order, something she hadn't told them for fear that they might do something embarrassing. They were acting the same as before, and the doubts and uncertainty of herself that she had felt then began to creep back in. Ahsoka just hoped that she had made the right decision by telling them anything. Leaving the High Council spire, she immediately sought out Fari and told her that she had somehow come back to the past and everything that had happened before. She both sought forgiveness and comfort for keeping such secrets, and Fari was more than willing to give it. They talked for the rest of the day, with Fari bombarding Ahsoka with the questions again of the future, making the doubts and fears of the present fade away. The next day, she found Anakin and told him the truth as well, but left out that they had been master and apprentice. She also took the opportunity to ask that he stay away from Palpatine, or at least be wary of him. Anakin was a bit perturbed by it, but agreed anyway. The doubt in herself and anxiety of the future crept back in, and caused Ahsoka to be on edge and down. Fari helped, but her master appeared to be staying in the temple, and Ahsoka didn't want to get between them. So, instead, she did what her master had taught her. When she wasn't writing the report for the council, she was in the training hall, channeling her emotions into the pod. This also conveniently allowed her to clear her head and think. The findings with the chips made her certain that Chancellor Palpatine was associated with the Sith, if not Darth Sidious himself. It angered her that he had used so many people and caused so much destruction, just to wipe out the Jedi. She understood that the Republic could have been fooled by him to be elected, but how could the Jedi? They had blindly followed him into a war they had no right fighting in, a war that's sole purpose now appeared to be the destruction of the Jedi. With their attitude towards what she had said, and what they had done previously, perhaps the Jedi Order itself was doomed. Perhaps the only way for the Jedi to live was to leave the Order. Though, in the end, that hadn't worked for her. The High Council's meeting lasted for several days after that, in which several senior Jedi and Jedi loyal senators made appearances. but they never called for her again. It seemed apparent that they didn't want to hear a story again, or a view on the situation, only what facts she had to offer with the report. When she finished compiling every important detail she could remember, she gave the report to Battlemaster Syndraulic, whom she was happy to see again. She had felt petty and had wanted to share it with them, but forced her to have some hope. She had only included the vile things though, leaving out anything personal or the mistakes of others. Ahsoka believed that they could change, and that it would be wrong to punish them for something they might do. She also felt guilty that she hadn't done more to change Master Bulk's fate. The council was another matter. After everything that they had done, she could no longer bring herself to fully trust them as a whole anymore. She instead constantly sought out Plo Koon for updates from the meeting, and it kept her surprisingly well informed, albeit keeping out sensitive details. This apparent faith and trust in her slowly made Ahsoka feel more at ease and confident in herself. When the High Council meeting finally concluded, Plo Koon was the first to know the outcome. Members of the High Council were still divided on all aspects, so all they had said alone were three things: that the clone army was on the Sith side and were to be ignored and avoided. They were to start moving the main location of the Jedi Temple off Coruscant, and then they would wait for the Sith to actively reveal themselves to the Republic. Ahsoka felt sorry for the clones. She knew they were puppets, but understood the decision was likely for the best. She was also fine with the Jedi moving off Coruscant. Ahsoka felt more at tune with the Force and at home when surrounded by nature than she did on Coruscant surrounded by Durocrete. This could just be because of her early life before she was brought to the temple though. Waiting, on the other hand, was what she had been trying to stop doing. She had wanted to stop only reacting to the Sith, but she should have realized the High Council wouldn't do anything. They were complacent and too close ties with the Senate. Perhaps this was again the best thing for them at this time though. A quick action would be nice, but from her experience, it might end up doing more harm than good. She must not have been hiding her emotions well as Plo Koon began comforting her, telling her that if she thought of anything like Kamino, then let him know and he would help her. She smiled up at him and thanked him before he continued. He told her he had managed to convince the council to temporarily make him her master. Ahsoka smiled wide and tears formed in the corners of her eyes as both relief and joy flooded her. It hadn't been a question of if, but when she would get a new master, and who it could be had been worrying her not only since Kellex, but since she had heard Zora Bulk's name in the High Council chamber. Part of her always knew that Master Bulk would leave, and she would be masterless, and having it come true only made it worse. She was relieved that it was at least temporarily solved and that Plo Koon was there for her. He was even the person she had wanted to be her original master of Anakin. This made the painfully slow days that followed bearable, as she got to be constantly by Plo Koon's side. A benefit of this was that she had access to all the information that he got told. He didn't even try to hide any of it from her. Things got busy as there was a lot of work that needed to be done in order to move the Jedi off Coruscant. However, from the updates, the progress of moving was slower than anticipated, primarily due to the Senate protesting the move. It was also from these updates, a few weeks later, that she heard the battle droids were starting to be stationed on planets. In response, to help appease the Senate, the Jedi High Council quickly decided to send teams of Jedi to these worlds to investigate to figure out if these actions were both legal and allowed by the planets. They were always trying to appease the Senate, both before and now. At least now they're helping the people at the edge of the galaxy this time. The situation continued like this for over a year. The Jedi stuck between the Senate and what came to be known as a Confederacy of Independent Systems. So far though, the Jedi had appeased the Senate more than working to move the main Jedi Temple off Coruscant. Unnervingly, several Jedi had also been killed or gone missing while on these diplomatic missions to the worlds the CIS had stationed droids on. But unlike after Kellex, Paladins were still permitted to accompany their masters, even as several lost their lives. So I could become worried for far after the first Padawan came back dead, so after voicing it with Plo Koon, they began going on missions together. Having two Keldors, a species known for being wise in their sense of justice, helped the law in the negotiation and peacefully resolving situations when they came up. Ahsoka didn't have the same worry for Anakin. She did worry, but she knew that he could survive worse. Because of the combination of Obi-Wan's diplomatic skills and Anakin's impatience, they were often sent to some of the worst places, but she knew that they would be fine as long as they stuck together. With a suggestion from Ahsoka, Plo Koon, like-minded Jedi they had told, focused their efforts on worlds that had sharp splits in their factions. Worlds that were at risk of civil war, whether they had been occupied or not. From her experience, these were the worlds that had been most problematic for the Republic war effort, and the ones most devastated. Jedi going to the worlds before the CS came inadvertently started to slow its spread as, when they went to occupy the planet, there was an opposition and united front in place. Regarding the CIS, the Republic claimed they had no right to intervene as of now, as all the planets CIS stationed droids on claimed they had welcomed them, even going so far as to say that Jedi deaths weren't because of the CIS. The CIS also just bypassed any world that managed to publicly oppose them and moved on to another planet, further delegitimizing the Republic's say in the matter. However, the spread of the CIS had started to move to rearm the Republic. As it stood, the Republic had no standing army or navy, only planetary defense forces that were woefully undermanned and under-equipped with outdated equipment. Though the Senate still couldn't decide if the CIS was forcibly occupying planets or being aggressive, multiple defense contracts had already been signed with several companies to produce more advanced equipment, and a recruitment drive for the military had commenced. Though it was only peaceful on the surface, the day of the first battle of Geonosis came and went without active war breaking out. It made Ahsoka a bit more at ease knowing that, even by a small amount, there was more peace in the galaxy than there had been before, and it was all somehow thanks to her involvement. This didn't last long though, as a few months after this, word reached the Republican Jedi that droids were starting to actively invade planets now, sparing none that resisted, and an unofficial declaration of war had been declared on the Republic. The Jedi at first scrambled to stop these bloody invasions, but after dozens of Jedi fell in battle, and it appeared that the CIS was only after the Outer Rim, that council recalled all members that were in the path of the CIS and attempted to organize a front against them. Ahsoka, Fari, Night Dal, and Plo Koon were on Ryloth hoping to Twi'lek resistance, when the order to get back to Coruscant came. Knowing that it was best to obey, they were prepared to depart after some final coronation with Champ Syndulla. However, as they walked to their shuttle, Ahsoka felt a force presence that she hadn't felt for a while, one she had fought to forget, one that had grown darker. She instinctively ignited her lightsabers, shocking those around her, but the weak way walked out of the shadows as she turned to face him. This prompted Plo Koon to ignite his lightsaber, but Far and her master were still confused as they ignited theirs. It was only then that Ahsoka remembered that she hadn't told Far what she believed to have happened to her master. Sora Bulk slowly walked towards him, hands partially raised as if surrendering, and warmly greeted Ahsoka when he got close. Ahsoka stayed silent, so he continued, telling her that he hadn't come to fight or at the orders of Dooku. Instead, he was here to help them. He explained, saying he'd like to believe they hadn't fallen to the dark side of the Kellics, that he was just taking an opportunity presented to him, but he wasn't sure if they would believe that. Either way, he had gone close to Dooku and had managed to get evidence that Chancellor Palpatine was a Sith Lord, that Dooku was his apprentice, and that the CIS and the droid army were under Palpatine's control. Ahsoka refused to believe his change of heart. His presence was still too dark, but Plo Koon told him that he would give him one last chance. Ahsoka wanted to argue, but knew that it was her emotions talking, not her head. Her emotions were clouding her judgment, so she would trust Plo Koon as he trusted her. Sora Bulk told him he was going to give him his lightsaber and a data card containing the evidence. Then he would allow them to arrest him. Ahsoka took the initiative, closing the gap to collect his lightsaber, which clipped to her belt, and the data card, which tossed Plo Koon, before using binders that Plo Koon tossed her to restrain him. They then quickly got to the shuttle, Ahsoka staying behind Sora Bulk, lightsaber still ignited. He tried to talk with her, but she just ignored him and he soon stopped trying. The shuttle remained silent the entire time back to Coruscant, though Fari's worried gaze was constantly on Ahsoka the whole trip, but she didn't want to say anything in front of Bulk. When the shuttle landed in the Jedi Temple and the ramp lowered, there were temple guards waiting led by Syndraulic. Before they could take Bulk though, he turned towards Ahsoka, telling her that she had caught Count Dooku's attention, and possibly Palpatine's. He urged her to be careful, before the temple guards pulled him along with Plo Koon and Night Owl following, leaving Ahsoka and Fari. They went back to Fari's room, not wanting to have anything to do with Sora Bulk as Ahsoka's room was so connected with his. Ahsoka was still on edge and fiddling with Bulk's lightsaber. It looked to be the same one they had the day he had left, but she could feel the dark side from it. She waited till she was in Fari's room before she ignited it. The crimson blade was proof that Bulk had fallen to the dark side. He had bled his crystal. As she looked at the crimson lightsaber, without prompting, she told Fari what Bulk had done in her previous life, how she had feared a repeat of that, how he seemed to prove her worst fear by disappearing after Kellex, and how she felt his presence darken their bond in the Force. They talked for a bit more before Fari urged Ahsoka to spar with her, knowing that it helped calm her down. Fari was still behind her in terms of skill and Force prowess, but she still held her own and gave Ahsoka a good duel. It was in the training hall that Plo Koon and Syndraulic found them, and Ahsoka realized that they had been there for several hours. She urged Fari to go get something to eat, but she insisted that she stay and hear what they had to say, and Ahsoka didn't argue. Syndraulic spoke first, telling them that Sora Bulk was being held in the temple's detention center for the time being, but she could visit him if she wanted. She didn't say anything to this, so Plo Koon started talking, telling her that even though there were several members that wanted to confront Chancellor Palpatine for being a Sith, cooler heads had prevailed, and it was decided that they would first have the Senate kick him out of office before they went after him. They remembered how the wording was on the inhibitor chips in the clones, and they didn't want to risk doing something that seemed would go along with the Sith's plan. Master Khalil would head this with a few others, while Master Windu was hand-selecting a group to go after Chancellor Palpatine once they had been kicked out of office. They talked for a bit more before Plo Koon and Syndraulic excused themselves, their schedules now even busier. As all they could do now was wait and hope, Ahsoka and Fari went and got something to eat before heading off to their beds. Ahsoka arrived back in her room as the sun was setting, but she couldn't seem to sleep even after several hours. Giving up, she got out of bed and went to her desk where she had set Bulk's lightsabers beside hers. The darkness emanating from it was overbearing the small, barren room. Picking it up, she sat on the floor and began meditating. Ahsoka didn't know what she was doing. She felt that she should do this. She deconstructed the lightsaber, letting the crimson crystal fall into her hand as the rest of the lightsaber components fell to the ground, forgotten. She continued to meditate, focusing this time on the crystal. The darkness from it steadily dissipated until it soon completely vanished, leaving the area around her feeling clean and pure. Ahsoka opened her eyes as the kyber crystal dropped back into her hand. She gazed at it. It was like ice, without a trace of crimson or any color for that matter. She didn't know what she had just done. Records on the Sith were hidden, so she didn't know much on kyber crystals that had been bled, or if it was possible to purify them. But it was believed that there was no coming back once something had been corrupted by the dark side. So it was time to hold on to the crystal as is, wanting to investigate, but thought better of it and placed it back in the lightsaber. This time, eyes open, watching the process. She stood, her legs cramping as the light from the morning sun began to reflect off the reconstructed lightsaber. As she was about to ignite it, her comlink lit up. It was a message from Plo Koon, telling her to come to the temple map room immediately. So clipped the lightsaber to her belt again, without thinking, along with hers, and rushed out of the room. Arriving at the temple map room, she surprised Plo Koon and some other Jedi. Plo Koon likely hadn't expected her to be there this quickly, and she admitted that she had already been awake. He probably suspected that she hadn't slept, but didn't comment on it, only a worried look before he turned back to the holopad in his hand. She often had sleepless nights after coming back, something that she had thought she had overcome, but had resurfaced after Kellex, as well as the fight that she had recently been in, and it had caught Plo Koon's attention. He tried to help her, but not much progress had been made. More Jedi quickly arrived, and once the little group had gathered, Plo Koon spoke. Master Windu had gone against the Council's decision, and, as soon as he got a strike team together, he went after Palpatine. It didn't appear they actually made a move against him though, instead sealing him on course by monitoring and restricting traffic off-world. Palpatine had since disappeared, having last been seen right before the Senate meeting had begun that morning. Master Windu apparently followed him into the Undercity, but he wasn't actively communicating with them. Since then, the CIS had launched a major offensive forward, and they suspected that Count Dooku was trying to get to Palpatine. They would let Master Windu clean up his mess and deal with Palpatine, while Master Leia dealt with the Senate. Right now, they need to stop the CIS before they reach their objective, whether it be Coruscant or not. Plo Koon uses holomap projector in Center Room to send Jedi across the galaxy to collect whatever ships, fighters, and bombers are ready, and then went to Kamino himself with Ahsoka to get the clone army. Though he knew that they were under the Sith, and the Council had wanted to stay away from them. Simply put, the Republic didn't have the manpower to man all the ships to stop the CIS's advance. They needed the clones, even with the risk that they would betray them. Master Windu had already disobeyed the Council anyway, so he wasn't worried. Once on Kamino, Ahsoka quickly realized that Plo Koon had made Kamino the staging point for the gathering Republic forces. It took late into the next day before most everything had gathered, and for the clones to board and familiarize themselves with the ships and starfighters. They had started removing the chips from the clones as soon as Plo Koon and Ahsoka had arrived, starting with the commanding officers, and the ones that would be close to the Jedi, especially prioritizing the crew of the vendor Plo Koon had designated as a flagship. Ahsoka knew that they would probably need more time, not only for everyone to get accustomed to their station, but also to get more chips removed from the clones. But there was no more time. The CIS forces were making astounding progress forward. If that progress continued, then they would be to Coruscant within a week. This gathering Republic Navy was already on the other side of the galaxy with the CIS fleet between them and Coruscant. So, early in the morning of the fourth day since Ahsoka and Plo Koon arrived on Kamino, Plo Koon set out in command of the ad hoc fleet of vendors, acclimators, hammerheads, and a vast swarm of other ships, both old and new. Ships that are from planetary defense forces or fresh from the shipyards. Ships that are built for combat and ones built for diplomatic missions. Ships that are crewed by mixed species or entirely by clones. It took another couple of days for this fleet to catch up to the CIS fleet, and it was at this point when Plo Koon took Ahsoka aside. He told her that he trusted her and believed in what she had been through. It was for this reason that he was secretly handing over command of the fleet to her, as she was the only one with the experience to command it. She didn't try to argue, instead feeling relieved. This had been a worry for her, and even though she knew she shouldn't command it, she knew that she was the only one that had a chance at completely stopping the CIS's advance. It is because of her intimate knowledge from the 3 years of war she had been through with this same enemy that she was this confident. Ahsoka followed Plo Koon back to the bridge of the vendor they were on. She gazed out of the swarm of ships, some of which she herself had never had under her command, and prepared herself mentally for what lay ahead. This was drastically different from her previous first command over Ryloth, and she would do her utmost to make the outcome better than that one. No, she would stop the CIS and the Sith behind it in their tracks. She would make them feel with everything that they had put her through, both from before and now. Ahsoka would see victory, no matter what. Instead of trying to get in front of the CIS fleet, Ahsoka planned to attack them from the rear, since they were behind them anyway. Even if the commander had heard the Republic fleet was gathering, they wouldn't know where or how large it was. As the fleet moved into position, they continued to take the inhibitor ships out of as many clones as possible, as well as blocking all communication to the outside, with the flagship as the exception, not wanting to risk on triggering the inhibitor chip in any clone. As the battle grew nearer, Ahsoka was worried who was commanding the CIS's fleet grew nearer. The CIS previously had some formidable admirals and generals, but she was confident against most of them. The ones she most feared, though, were Admiral Trench and General Grievous. She doubted Grievous was in command. They had previously kept him a secret for as long as possible, though that might have changed in the urgency of the situation. Admiral Trench, on the other hand, worked for the CIS since the beginning. In the end, it didn't matter who it was. Ahsoka was determined to stop the CIS advance and destroy this fleet. This was the action she had been waiting for, the way to fight back against the Sith. The latest report they had received was that the CIS fleet was above the planet Chazwa, so Ahsoka positioned the Republic fleet to jump away and ready it for battle. Once ready, not allowing a moment of hesitation, Ahsoka ordered that they jump to Chazwa. As soon as they exited hyperspace, the CIS fleet loomed ahead of them, and the massive battle began. She had wanted to cause much damage before the CIS fleet could reposition to face them, and was incredibly daring in her attack. It seemed to pay off as several CIA ships were quickly knocked out before they could respond. As battle waged, Ahsoka began to recognize the movements of the fleet and the attack and defense patterns. This didn't seem to be the work of an organic. This resembled the work of an early tactical droid, making her aggressiveness the right move. The early tactical droids had a tendency to underestimate their opponents. The bolder and more unorthodox and aggressive the attack, the lower the chance they could respond due to their system's inability to process what was happening. Using this and everything she had learned, she picked apart their formation, tearing apart their fleet piece by piece, struck deep into their formation. It helped that most of the CIA ships were converted cargo ships and not purpose-built warships, unlike the majority of the opposing Republic Navy. She targeted the few purpose-built warships with the bombers at her disposal, while she had the Republic capital ships focused on the converted cargo ships, not wanting to lose too many of them. The battle appeared to be slowly turning to a Republic victory, when a dark presence that she hadn't noticed before caught Ahsoka's attention. Count Dooku was here. She turned to Plo Koon and he seemed to have sensed it as well, meaning that Count Dooku had been hiding his presence. Moments after, a bridge officer reported a small ship leaving one of the Providence-class dreadnoughts in the rear of the formation. Ahsoka knew without a doubt that was Count Dooku, and that he was fleeing, using the remnants of his fleet to cover his escape. She turned to Plo Koon again, but she didn't have to say anything. He told her to take a starfire and go, and he would send every Jedi that he could to follow her. He urged her not to do anything risky, and that he would meet up with her once he finished here. Ahsoka issued her last order, to destroy that Providence-class dreadnought, now knowing that that was where the tactical droid was, before she ran out of the bridge and to the hangar, where she jumped into the Plo Koon starfighter. She took off, flew at full speed through the battle that was still raging around her, though she caught a sight of the Providence-class dreadnought exploding, which appeared to put the CIS fleet into confusion, and they began offering minimal resistance to their destruction. However, as Ahsoka got to the other side of the battle, she just caught a glimpse of the shuttle before it disappeared in hyperspace, taking Dooku's force presence with it. They nearly had him. No, she couldn't lose him like this. Desperate, Ahsoka reached out with the force, reaching as far as she could. The CIS could build more ships and droids to replace those lost today. Capturing or killing Count Dooku would have made a real difference. This battle had the potential to be something greater. She couldn't let this opportunity pass. However, she felt nothing as, deep down, she knew she would. Defeated, she grabbed the controls to turn back to finish the battle. However, a prompting in the Force called out to Ahsoka. Without hesitation, Ahsoka blindly jumped into hyperspace. She came out over a moon that orbited a bluish-looking planet that wasn't in the charts. The moon was brown with some green patches with no visible water, but covered in what had to be ice. There was also that distinctive force presence of Count Dooku coming from the moon. Ahsoka flew to it, landing a distance away from where she had felt Count Dooku. She set out a beacon to alert the others of her location before disabling her ship. Either this was a secret base, or, more likely, Dooku could have crashed here, and, if he had crashed, she didn't want to use her ship to escape. She crept towards where she sensed him, happening upon a crashed shuttle on the way, its engines completely destroyed. He was definitely trapped. He had also set a beacon, which she disabled before continuing her search for him. He hadn't hidden his presence yet, but she doubted they hadn't noticed hers. He was luring her in, and she let him. Ahsoka found him waiting for her on a ridge that gave a good view of the moon they were on. She ignited her lightsabers as he turned towards her. Dooku commented that he had never seen or heard of white lightsabers. He had first noticed them on Kellex, and had looked into her as a result. However, besides the fact that she was a prodigy with a lightsaber and her above average force prowess, she was an incredibly mundane and typical Jedi. That wouldn't save her though, unless she was willing to join him. He didn't want an unknown variable, even if she was harmless, so she would either have to die at his hands or fall to the dark side and join him. Even though he was a bit on edge after Bulk disappeared, he would still give her a chance. He wouldn't even force her to bleed her kyber crystals, as color was already mesmerizing. Ahsoka ignored his offer, instead asking why he had left the Order and joined the Sith with everything he could do. Dooku smiled, telling her that Jedi were corrupt and complacent, ignoring the suffering of the weak and helping those in power. He had tried to convince them to change, but they had refused to listen, and his precious student had paid the price. The Jedi Order was doomed. There was an even better reason for her to join him. Ahsoka acknowledged that the Jedi Order needed change, but she had come to realize that that change would need to take time. It would need a generational shift, something she still didn't want to stick around for. However, if she had to choose, she would rather stay a Jedi than join the Sith. Dooku frowned at that, saying it was a shame and that he hoped she wouldn't hold it against him if he took her lightsabers with him. He promptly ignited his lightsaber and moved towards her, their blades quickly clashing. She knew that he was using Makashi, a form that picked apart other forms, so she couldn't be defensive or prolong the duel, so she went on the offensive. They pushed against each other, each pushing them being pushed. Ahsoka tried to move around him, but she was often caught and had to face him head on. She switched between forms, trying to find one that could work against him, even using a version of Form 5, but nothing seemed to be working. Dooku was slowly in the upper hand, beginning to take over the duel, while Ahsoka was only tiring. Engaging in another lightsaber lock, she realized she had been foolishly confronted by herself. Not even Anakin had been able to defeat him the many times he encountered him, not until the very end. Dooku pushed forward, slamming his blade repeatedly against hers, and her foot twisted as it found a hole in the ground. She fell but managed to roll away, his blade sinking into the ground where she had been. There was only one thing she had left to try. Gingerly standing, she got into the stance Bulk had drilled into her. When they locked blades again, Ahsoka reached for the fear, anger, despair, and frustration that had built up since Rex shot her. No, since the start of the awful war. She used it to fuel her as she pushed back against Dooku, the pain from her twisted ankle no longer bothering her, only giving her more strength. Dooku's eyes widened, a look of at first triumph, then horror as he buckled into her onslaught. She moved around him, slashing whenever an opportunity arose, and he frantically blocked her, but his body was soon covered in small burns with his clothes scorched. He retreated to the edge of the ridge, forcing her to come at him head on, but she didn't back down. As her blades locked again, Ahsoka felt the pain, anger, and some fear from Dooku. He was using the dark side to try to combat her, but strangely enough, it was instead fueling her, giving her more strength as she redirected it back at him. She locked blades with him, slowly crushing him under the strength that was now coursing through her. However, he wasn't beaten just yet. He used a burst of the Force, launched her back before sending lightning her way. She blocked it with her sabers, but her concentration was broken, and he was quickly on her. When she moved to block his saber, he shot lightning again, catching her off guard and hitting her exposed right arm, sending her main saber flying. Dooku pushed the opening it created and slashed at her left arm. It only grazed her, but it had its intended effect as she lost grip on her shoto, and Dooku kicked it away. Her twisted foot buckled again, and now probably more injured than it had been with the acrobatics she had just been doing. Ahsoka fell to her knees as the exhaustion from the duel weighed on her. His experience was just too much. She couldn't help but chuckle. She had to face death on so many occasions that it was starting not to frighten her anymore. She didn't want to die now, particularly wanting to live this life to the fullest, to be at peace, to at least be old enough to be considered an adult. But she couldn't say that she would change much. Dooku was stuck here, having at least been worn down by her, and Plo Koon was on his way. If her death could bring down at least one of the Sith, then she was fine with that. Dooku raised his lightsaber, placing both hands on it for the final swing. He told her that she had made a good attempt, but had shown them that she would have been too dangerous if they let her live to learn the dark arts. He would at least grant her a quick and painless death. As the swing came, Ahsoka felt a familiar hum of a kyber crystal, and she gave into it. She lurched backward as Dooku's swing was about to decapitate her, his blade coming close enough to burn her montral. She grabbed the unfamiliar lightsaber from her belt that she somehow felt intimately connected to. Igniting it, its bright white color illuminated Dooku's stunned face as she swung. She wasn't aiming to kill though, instead cutting off both of his hands that were still clutching his lightsaber from the swing they had put too much effort in. His scream echoed in the valley below as he dropped to his knees, holding the stumps of his arms close. It hurt seeing people in pain, and unfortunately Count Dooku was no different. After quickly gathering all the lightsabers and clipping them to her belt, she knelt down in front of him. Using some of the force healing techniques she had learned for the clones, whom she had, at the time, believed she would command again, she eased Dooku's pain and tended to the burnt flesh. Ahsoka stayed there with him, even as the light faded. Neither of them spoke, but that didn't stop her mind from trying to plan her next move, as the adrenaline from the fight faded. Plo Koon's fighter could only hold one person, and though there might be some supplies in it, it was too far away from here. She didn't know if anything was in the shuttle Dooku crashed in, but from the state she saw it in, it wouldn't be in good shape. Neither of which were feasible to get to with a wounded person in tow, and she wasn't leaving him. More aside from the fact that he was also defenseless, she had fought so much and almost lost a life capturing him. Ahsoka wasn't about to risk it all being a waste by allowing him an opportunity to escape. Several hours passed before the noise of engines reached Ahsoka. The light had stabilized at twilight, and Dooku had since fallen into a fitful sleep, with Ahsoka herself fighting to keep awake. She stood, unclipping her own lightsabers and holding them ready in hand. She waited to ignite them for the same reason why she was holding them. Was it friend or foe? She didn't want to draw attention to her by igniting her lightsabers if it were the latter. Their strong white light could probably be seen from a large distance. Dooku could also have a beacon, and though she disabled it, someone could have gotten the signal beforehand, or they could have just used hers. Even with her wounds, exhaustion, and aching body, she continued to fight for the outcome she was so desperate to achieve. It took a little while longer before the engines got closer, and she readied herself. However, she found her body instinctively relaxing as she recognized the engine sound. It was one she had become familiar with during the war. Floodlights illuminated her as it rose past the ridge, and the distinctive shape of an LAAT was visible behind them. So collapsed back to the ground as it landed by her, and Plo Koon came running out with several other Jedi clones following. More LAATs landed, and they lowered Dooku onto one after putting a force-rank collar on him. Ahsoka was then guided onto one and ferried to a vendor in orbit where her wounds were treated before she quickly ate something, then collapsed into a bed arranged for her. They transported Dooku back to Coruscant after that, locking him up in the detention center with Bulk after the healers had treated him. He mostly cooperated when he saw Bulk, likely seeing little use in hiding anything since they already knew most of it. His testimony forced Senate to conclude their meeting, and the vote was overwhelmingly in favor of kicking Chancellor Palpatine from office. There was still no news about him though. Master Windu was still scouring the Undercity with his group in search of him. They found hideouts and labs, all reeking of the dark side, but had yet to get an active leader after Palpatine had killed the tail they attached to him. Ahsoka and the fleet didn't stay on Coruscant for long though, only long enough for her to heal and the fleet to be repaired. A new CIS fleet had started rampaging through the outskirts of the galaxy. This time, she was sure that this one was commanded by General Grievous. The fleet's actions fit his style perfectly. Again, Plo Koon gave command over the Republic fleet to her, but instead of seeking a decisive battle, she instead led squadrons of fighters and bombers in search of the CIS fleets. The fleet that Dooku had led didn't have a ship that she remembered so well, so she feared that General Grievous had it like he did before, the Malevolence. Its mega ion cannon could destroy the Republic fleet, so she wanted to destroy it as they had before. Ahsoka led dozens of attack runs on the CIS fleet, destroying at least one ship every time, until she confirmed that the Malevolence was in fact part of the fleet. Its position, however, was at the center of the fleet, thus preventing it from using its ion cannon without hitting friendly ships, though she wouldn't put it past Grievous to do this. Either way, she had learned what she needed and prepared the Republic fleet for battle. Starting off, she led half the Starfighters into an initial attack run on the CIS fleet, with several squadrons, including hers, going for the Malevolence, with the rest attacking targets of opportunity, focusing on purpose-built warships. The point defense fire was formidable, but enough of the Y-Wings managed to get through. After they had successfully destroyed the Malevolence's mega ion cannon, Ahsoka sent the message, and the Republic fleet jumped in and joined the battle. Plo Koon was in command, but operating in accordance with the plan Ahsoka had come up with. With the wider CIS fleet engaged with the Republics, Ahsoka led another attack run on the Malevolence. If Grievous was leading this fleet, that would be his flagship, and if he was killed, not only would it save many lives in the long run, but the fleet would fall into chaos again, like the previous fleet had after the Talc Droid was taken out. She sent some Y-Wings to take out the engines and hangars, while she led the rest to attack the bridge. The majority of the rest of the CIS fleet was quickly routed, her relentless attacks the past few weeks having whittled it down and compromised its combat effectiveness. The Malevolence also began to crumble, as the Republic capital ships were able to begin targeting it as well. Ahsoka was scanning to make sure that no shuttles were somehow leaving the destroyed hangars, when it finally exploded, a terrific fireball engulfing it before all the oxygen vented into space. The remaining CIS fleet was promptly dealt with, not sparing a single ship from destruction. The battle had lasted for hours, and everyone was exhausted, including Ahsoka, but she still looked at the losses, a habit she had picked up from before as Anakin's apprentice. The Starfires had suffered heavy casualties, but thankfully, few cap ships were lost, though few of them escaped without damage. Most of the fleet went back to Quad to be repaired, though intelligence reports indicated that there would not be another battle as large or coordinated as the previous two, with the CIS Navy having been virtually gutted of ships. Even with this, the corporations that had funded and created the droid army had tried to take advantage of the chaos, and take as much as they could. Even though the CS had already suffered 2 major defeats, these corporations were still running around the Outer Rim without care, claiming innocence in the Senate. However, unknown to them, Count Dooku's testimony had not only incriminated Palpatine, but also most of the corporate factions. The Republic was already preparing itself to wage war against them, with a force made up of both regular soldiers, but primarily the clones. Though the clone army was at first deemed a Jedi army because it was ordered by Sifo-Dyas, the High Council officially gave it to the Republic, both to appease them, but also because they still wanted nothing to do with the clones. Besides this preparation for war, and the limited expansions done by the corporate factions in the Outer Rim, things in the galaxy mostly returned to normal. The CIS as an organization collapsed without Dooku, but there are still worlds that wanted to secede from the Republic. The Senate was trying to deal with these diplomatically, which most everyone was on board with. Bell Antilles was acting chancellor now, since he had been second in the vote that elected Palpatine. This was only until another vote could be taken, as the whole ordeal of kicking Palpatine out of office was rushed and chaotic. Still, no one wanted the Republic to be without a leader in such turbulent times. Senator Bell Organa took his place as Alderaan Senator, and Ahsoka was relieved to have a familiar face in the Senate, though it was unfortunate that they didn't know each other now. With her victories over the two fleets, but primarily because of her defeat and capture of Count Dooku, Ahsoka knew there was talk to make her a knight. She had little faith in this happening though, as there was more suspicion than anything. Most of the High Council and many others simply couldn't believe that she had defeated him, and to be honest, she couldn't either. She had never fought or even met him previously, so she had no experience to back on. Her victory had been entirely luck, and the fact that Dooku must have been underestimating her to the very end. Still, she was not yet 16 and was still unsure if she wanted to continue to be a Jedi. Ahsoka now had several people inside the Order that made her want to stay, but the Council was an even bigger mess and needed a change. It didn't matter much, as she figured that she could continue to pull off the decision to leave till she at least became an adult. Her life mostly went back to how it had been the past year, albeit with less action and more work. With Master Windu's brash actions, the Senate was now kicking the Jedi off Coruscant, claiming that they had too much power and did not want a repeat of Windu's actions. Ahsoka laughed when she heard this. The High Council had been making weak attempts to leave, but now the Senate was making it seem like it was their idea and forcing them to go. This would take years though, so both sides are still playing nice with each other. Plo Koon and Ahsoka are usually off Coruscant now anyway, wandering the galaxy to both possibly find a new place for the Jedi Temple, but also try to build friendly relations with worlds to create a better image of the Jedi. She didn't expect to hear anything from the Republic anymore, but a message soon reached them, and it was for Ahsoka. The High Command of the newly created Grand Army of the Republic had learned that she had been the one to lead the defeat of the two separate fleets, and wanted her to take command again. The Jedi had not become officers in the GR like they had previously, so she technically wasn't allowed to take command as she was a Jedi. However, The message stated that they had already gotten permission from the Chancellor for her to become a general, so they were waiting on her decision. Ahsoka suspected they hadn't talked to the Jedi Council about it, but she didn't care. Even if they had told her not to, Ahsoka wanted to be with the clones. They had been her brothers before, and the Council couldn't say anything about the fear of them possibly betraying her because she had already been betrayed by them. She knew what it felt like, but she had forgiven them. She had forgiven Rex, someone who she wanted to see again. She told Plo Koon her decision, and he supported her, saying that he would conveniently forget to tell the Council and let them find out themselves when the time came. Plo Koon dropped her off at the Corellian War Academy, where she would meet the admirals and generals that she would be fighting with, some of whom she had even previously served alongside. The realization of the situation made her smile. Who knew that she was now the person that was going to fight in a war that she had no right fighting in? Though new military academies were popping up throughout the core regions, Corellia had one of the few surviving military academies that had lasted the Republic's golden age. Ahsoka was thankful that she didn't have to war on the streets of Corellia to get here, though. She had heard plenty of terrible stories from Corellians who had left their homeworld. Inside the academy, that the High Command of the GR were using as a temporary command center, Ahsoka met the generals and admirals she would be serving alongside. These people include the likes of Admiral Wolfie Lauren, and unfortunately Admiral Wilf Tarkin, with many others. Most of whom she had never met but at least heard their names. There was a mixed welcome, which she understood. Not only did they not know of her past, but she was still a child and a Jedi at that. She was just thankful that none of them were openly hostile towards her, except maybe Tarkin. They would tolerate her because they had been ordered to, though she doubted that they wouldn't do anything if she showed any sign of not performing well. These military leaders were making plans to drive the corporate factions off the worlds that they had invaded, while at the same time planning to hunt down the leaders of the corporate factions. Count Dooku had told them a way to shut down the entire droid army, and that was with the passcodes of all the leaders of the corporate factions. So going to be part of this latter group, that being tasked with the clone commandos and individuals that had the skills to command them. Instead, she would be liberating planets alongside most people in this room. Each admiral and general was given command of a unit of clones, to which Ahsoka spoke up and asked her to command the 501st. They were unnerved that she knew of the unit, but they didn't protest. They didn't know anything about it besides that it appeared to be smaller than most of the other clone units, which made it seem like the perfect choice to give to her. Since the CIS had few purpose-built warships anymore, the Republic Navy would focus on containing the droids and assisting humanitarian efforts when not called upon to aid the ground forces. With the plan set, they all set out to their posts. Ahsoka and the 501st were assigned to the southeastern edge of the Outer Rim. Admiral Lauren had heard that she had spent a lot of time there over the past few years, and had met many of the leaders of the planets, so she had recommended that it would be where she could be most useful. When she rendezvoused with the 501st over Hordessa, she was relieved to hear a familiar trooper had already promoted to commander as her second in command, CT-7567. It saddened her that without the Jedi, most of the clones hadn't chosen names for themselves. Ahsoka made it her first task, to get the troopers to find suitable names. She had wanted the name Rex, fearing that he wouldn't choose that name again, but held back. It was his choice, and he wasn't the same person that she knew. She was also thrilled to find that CT-1226 had somehow become a member of the 501st, and he warmly greeted her upon learning that she was in command. While they thought of names, Ahsoka led them to battle, first stopping the invasion of Rhodia. After that, she went in support of Chancellor Duel and pushing the Techno Union off Ryloth. She hardly received anything from the higher-ups in the GR. They didn't even check in on her. But because of this, she was able to choose her battles. Ahsoka chose to focus on the worlds that were in more desperate need of help than those that truly did welcome the droid army. It went on like this for months, with the 501st jumping from one planet to another, freeing worlds from the corporate occupation or stopping their invasion. They even had to go help units in neighboring sectors on a few occasions when those units were being hard-pressed. Ahsoka wondered at times what the Republic Navy was doing, as it didn't seem to be containing the droid army. Though one of the few times GR reached out to her, they informed her that Geonos had been blockaded by the Republic Navy, so she didn't have to worry about invading it. Not like she was planning to anyway. She hadn't become close to any of the other generals, only the clones under her command, as nobody seemed to want to get close with her. That is, unless they needed help. She did hear that the Jedi High Council had learned of her decision, but they had thankfully remained mostly quiet about it. Plo Koon was the one that told her, as he had been keeping in contact with her. He told her that there were those that weren't happy about her actions, both on the Council and the wider Order, but they didn't dare voice it as the Hollow Knight was portraying her as a hero and is improving the image of the Jedi. Anakin had also been knighted and often came to visit her, always managing to bring Faria along. Faria recently turned 18 and they have spent her birthday together alongside the clones, celebrating against the Jedi Order's wishes. It's something that Faria had been wanting to do, as she remembered how her family celebrated it before she had been given over to the Jedi. She and Ahsoka tried to celebrate before, but had never been able to do much. Now though, they are outside the temple and away from the Jedi, and Ahsoka made sure to make it a day Faria would remember, it being the day she became an adult and all. Many of the clones had named themselves by then, and Ahsoka was relieved that Rex chose the same name. Most of the clones she had known also chose the same name as before, with CT-1226 choosing the name Trigger. Things were going surprisingly well until right after liberating Iskalon. It started when Ahsoka got a surprise call from the High Command, something that was of course near unheard of. They ordered her to go to Christophsis where the Techno Union was trying to invade, likely to try to negotiate a better outcome for themselves, and that she and the 501st would be placed under command of the general that was already there. It was almost common knowledge that many of the corporations had seen the writing on the wall and were trying to save their skin. These ones agreed to give up peacefully, accepting heavy fines and sanctions, while the rest were hoping to come to the negotiating table with vital worlds or other things as leverage, and force the Republic not to destroy their company and fiefdoms they had created. The Techno Union was one of the few corporations that were left, the rest having given up or been defeated. Wat Tambor was also one of the few remaining leaders that the JR needed to send the shutdown order for the droid army. Ahsoka knew that this would likely be the last major battle they would have before the conflict came to an end, and she resolved herself to face whatever the Techno Union could throw at her, as well as what she would have to put up with being in second in command. When the Fire Force got onto the planet, it was immediately obvious that the Techno Union was throwing everything it had left into capturing Christophsis. Ahsoka hadn't seen this many droids from the mass battles from before. It'd be a tough fight, but she knew that they could win. The primary reason for this was because the droids were being led by a tactical droid, which hadn't been able to learn or be upgraded. Upon seeing the resolve of the Republic, virtually all of the mercenary and organic commanders of the droid forces left. The clones joked that it was almost like a real-life training simulation with how predictable the droids were. However, contrary to their expectations, Ahsoka was ordered to have the Fire Force dig into the outskirts of Christophsis' capital by the general she was placed under, who was themselves to be going out to face the approaching droid army with his clone units. She was a bit put off by this. Not only were they sidelining the Fire Force because the general of the other clone unit was seeking glory, and using his rank and influence to do so, but he was dividing their force and preparing to engage the droids in unfavorable terrain. Still, Ahsoka forced herself to have faith as, with air support and the droids' predictability, it would be hard to lose, even with the droids' numbers advantage and the commander's incompetence. This faith didn't last long as things quickly started going wrong, starting with a supporting Republic fleet that was in orbit being ambushed by a surprisingly large droid fleet and routed. Then, remnants of the clone unit that went out to face the droids began to trickle back with reports of a droid army reaching the horizons, and that the droids' tactics were unfamiliar and thus unpredictable. It wasn't long after that she and the Fire Force were repulsing wave after wave of battle droids. They were nearly overrun on several occasions, but they managed to hold. For how long, Ahsoka wasn't sure. She had been promised reinforcements and supplies before the fleet had fled, but they had yet to arrive and the droids still had full control of the skies. She forced herself to again not wonder where the Republic Navy was, instead focusing on the battle at hand. Though the droids' actions were at first unfamiliar, Ahsoka was able to recognize something about them and adapt to counter. She did also want to go to a more advantageous position for the clones, or at least send out skirmishing parties, but neither were options. The city behind them was still full of civilians, having not been evacuated due to the planet's government's complete faith that the droids would be stopped before they ever reached the capital. For now, all Ahsoka could do was help her men desperately back the hordes of droids with their dwindling supplies. She was planning an infiltration to, hopefully, neutralize the one commanding the droids, and if not, then at least disrupt their supplies and communication. But progress for that was slow, as the droids were, as of now, constantly attacking. Whenever the droids were spotted, Ahsoka stayed in the foremost lines as much as possible, both to inspire the men and draw the attention of the droids to her, which usually worked. On one particular day, a day when the Fire Force lines were again near breaking, Ahsoka made a desperate decision to attack by herself to allow the troopers a moment to breathe, and, if possible, go after the commander by herself. She ordered Trigger to stay while she ran towards oncoming droids. But, before she could reach them, the droids simply folded over and collapsed. The entire vast droid formation that had once been charging forward simply collapsed to the ground. Cautiously, Ahsoka closed the remaining distance, uncertain if her senses were deceiving her. When she got to the vanguard of droids, she began kicking the hunks of metal. They didn't appear damaged. It seemed as if they had simply powered off. Trigger appeared by her side, startling her. She was about to reprimand him for following her when she saw that he had removed his helmet and had a goofy grin on his face. He gave her a comlink from which Admiral Yularen was speaking, saying that they had successfully gone all the passcodes and sounded the signal shut down the droid army. They were waiting for confirmation of the shutdown and wanted to be let know as soon as the commander received this message, if that was the case. So that is what had happened. She smiled as she realized that the war had somehow ended where it had previously started for her. They made their way back to the lines and she quickly sent a message to GR before gathering a squad of clones. Ahsoka wanted to find the command center of the droid army and figure out who had been commanding them before they could flee. She was also curious on how large the droid army here had been. Surprisingly, they found the command center not too far away, though they had to walk over what seemed like an endless carpet of shutdown droids to get there. Ahsoka had ordered the clones to remain behind to monitor to see if any ship left the planet, and so far, they hadn't reached out to her. That was odd. If it was an organic in command, then she was certain that they would have tried to run. However, all her questions were answered when she got to the communication section of the base. Inside, slumped over the control console, was a super tactical droid. Ahsoka thought they had yet to be invented, but here it was, right in front of her. She realized that this one must have been a prototype. That was her own explanation for its existence, and the odd tactics that had seemed somehow familiar only to her. It didn't matter anymore anyway, though she did take its head. Perhaps it was pointless, but there might be secrets inside its memory banks like there used to be. A Republic fleet appeared in orbit the next day, and she and what remained of the Fire Forces pulled off Christophsis, being replaced with another clone unit that was to clean up the mess left behind. The Fire Force went back to Kamino to rearm and refit, while Ahsoka went to Coruscant. In the short time since it was established, a permanent command center for the GR was built near the executive building. Its main feature being its state-of-the-art communication so they could communicate and coordinate every part of the Republic's military across the galaxy. After she landed, they debriefed her and she wrote an after-action report on the battle. She also handed the super tactical droid's head to them, showing them how to access its memory banks. Surprisingly, they didn't ask any questions on this. Instead, she was thanked for all of her efforts, and they told her that this was probably the end of her service, as there was no longer an enemy to fight. Ahsoka understood, knowing what was going to happen, and was more curious of what would happen to the clones. Didn't have an answer for her, so she thanked them for the opportunity and accepted the shuttle offered to get her to the Jedi Temple. When she arrived at the Jedi Temple, she was greeted with the news that Master Windu had finally managed to hunt down Palpatine. A short but bloody fight ensued in which half of Windu's strike team was killed, but they managed to kill Palpatine in the end. Ahsoka felt light as an immeasurable burden was lifted from her. The Sith were gone. The CIS was destroyed along with the corporate factions. Though it was imperfect, the galaxy was at peace with no threats besides its own incompetence. There was Maul and a warrior created with the criminal organizations, alongside Ventress and the other dark acolytes, but they could be easily dealt with if they posed a threat, now that there was anyone manipulating things behind the scenes. As her return became known, the council punished her for her actions, restricting her to the temple for a set time. Ahsoka didn't mind this, eager for the rest after the near constant action she had had. Farah and Anakin kept her company, both are now knights and able to do mostly as they pleased. She also often saw Plo Koon, Syndralic, Obi-Wan, and Night Dal, the latter two she had recently become close with. Years began to pass as forced change took place in the galaxy. The worlds that supported Society managed to peacefully find resolutions within the Republic. The Republic would decentralize even more, and sections of the galaxy would be ruled by their own Chancellor and Senates. They would still communicate and coordinate, but the people of the region would be governed by people of the region. and the taxes collected would go back into that region. They're still known as the Galactic Republic, but now within the Republic, several smaller republics were being created. These didn't necessarily follow any physical boundaries like systems or sectors. Worlds could be a part of a republic that had members light years away, while the neighboring planet was with another republic that contained the nearby system. It got confusing and complicated, but most people were happy as their voices were heard, and the situation was emphasized with. The fate of the clones was also mostly positive. They had been turned into a mobile police force, patrolling the galaxy, hunting criminals, and protecting civilians. When they weren't doing that, they focused on civil engineering on the more desolate worlds, building infrastructure and laying the foundation for growth, both economic and populous. They'd gone a salary, but most of them didn't know what to do with it, and they're also allowed to retire after 9 years of service, however most didn't. Their accelerator agent had been solved by the Republic after sending out a reward for any scientist that could stop it, which many jumped at. The Kaminoans had been sanctioned by the Republic for creating the army, and though they could still do their business, their operations were forever shrunk. This also meant that there would be no more clones to refill the clone army ranks. With how many were still being grown though, and the cure to the accelerated aging, the clone army would still last for decades. The corporate faction's fate was even worse than the Kaminoans. The ones that resisted were liquidized, with the rest being broken apart to the system level with heavy fines and sanctions. This opportunity allowed for several hundred once unheard of companies to jump up and take their place. This, along with protection from the clones, allowed unparalleled growth in the Outer Rim. Some worlds though didn't want help from the clones. Instead, these worlds used the remnants of the droid army and the navy to protect themselves, a move that was made easier with the creation of the smaller republics. There were protests against this move, but as most of the galaxy had been unaffected by the droids, they were enough to stop it. However, there are still limitations in the number and what type of droids could be on each planet. Also, in order to have a droid navy, the world needed to be part of a republic that had one, as an individual planet was barred from having any. The Jedi Order finally left Coruscant nearly 4 years after they were ordered to leave. They had built a new main temple on the planet Takodana. There had been talk of decentralizing like the Republic and creating hundreds of smaller temples across the galaxy, but this was decided against. The High Council wanted to keep a firm hand on the Order and its members, citing disasters from the past when they had been more decentralized as a reason. This decision made up Ahsoka's mind. She formally left the Jedi Order as they began to move. She had confided in everyone that she was close to about this beforehand, and, even though she insisted that she didn't, Fari left with her. Because of her being encaged and able to remember her childhood with her family, she didn't feel like she fit into the other Jedi that had been tempted to leave before. Ahsoka leaving gave her the courage and opportunity to do so. Anakin opted to stay, wanting to change the Order from within, to change lives like Ahsoka changed his by becoming his friend. Sora Bulk was released from the detention center as they moved as well. The Council deemed that he had done a good service for them by joining Count Dooku, but even after they released him, they still kept a close eye on him. So gave him back his lightsaber that she purified before she left, and a heartfelt talk with him, eventually forgiving both him for leaving and herself for not doing more for him. Ahsoka and Fari wandered the galaxy at first, constantly keeping in touch with their friends that remained in the Order. They also on occasions tagged along with Rex and the 501st on their peacekeeping missions. Ahsoka had become beloved by the clones again. They had made no hesitation bending or outright breaking the rules for her. Ahsoka and Fari eventually went to Fari's homeworld of Corditz to help her people against the Belugan. After they successfully overthrown the Belugan dictator Lord Otto Blank, it cemented the cage as the dominant species on the planet with sanctions on the Belugan for their crimes. Ahsoka took Fari to her homeworld of Shilly. Ahsoka's 18th birthday had by now passed, and she was in all regards an adult. Yet, even in this life, she still hadn't been made a knight, even with all the things that she had done, and she was fine with this. She no longer saw herself as a Jedi, and what they did as a whole meant little to her. It was on Shilla that the daughter came to her in her dream. The daughter agreed to her, telling her that she was proud of Ahsoka for everything she had been able to accomplish. The Sith were gone, and though there still wasn't balance in the Force with the Jedi, Anakin was working on it, fulfilling the Chosen One prophecy. The daughter told her that she had always believed in Ahsoka, and knew that she was right to have put her faith and trust in her to correct the future. The daughter wished Ahsoka a long, happy life, before she faded away. Ahsoka slept soundly after that, calmed with the knowledge that the future was going to be one of peace with calmness in the Force.